You don't want to be butt fucked. Trust me.
Dude, going in this church was probably the scariest thing I've ever experienced. Well, no, there's another story I could tell another time about there's a giant, and I mean giant. I'll tell this story next stream because you guys got to see photos of it. So what I have to do is get the photos. I'll send them to Rich. I'll make sure that Rich can show the photos because I have a story about an old psychiatric hospital. It's the size of like 20 football fields. You sent
me some of those pictures of that.
Yeah, those stories are fucking insane about going into the psych ward and seeing this place. They filmed a bunch of movies there. If you've seen How to Tell Scary Stories in the Dark, the hospital in that movie is the real hospital I got to go into.
Fuck.
This fucking place, you know, if you're into the paranormal, this fucking place was terrifying because it's so massive. Cucumbers.
Thank you, Dennis Reyes.
Dennis says, thank you, Dad Jesus, for providing entertainment during the dark times. Please support the family. Thank you. I'll support your family. Yeah, it's in Ontario, that hospital. Yeah, Dark Side. Yeah, it's called the St. Thomas Psychiatric. It's like hours from me. Dude, it is, if you guys, I have to get some video. By the way, I illegally flew my drone over it to get some video of it, so I have drone footage of it. This place is so big, it takes 4 hours to walk around. We did a 6-hour tour, which is, I shouldn't be saying this, but we didn't get in illegally. We got in through somebody who does maintenance for the place. That's a whole story in its own. But this fucking place, guys, is the most insane fucking thing I've seen in my life. It's essentially a small town was created for insane people. And it was just full of insane people and doctors who lived at the hospital. So the place had an actual bank. A real bank was in the hospital. It had a dentist. It had a fucking library, VHS tapes. It had everything. It was insane. So I got to tour that. And what the best part about that tour was, guys, was the guy giving the tour told stories about what happened there while we were there. It's called the St. Thomas Psychiatric Hospital. You can look it up on Google if you want to look quickly. St. Thomas Psychiatric Hospital, the shutdown one. It is fucking insane. So going into that hospital, the stories, man, terrifying. Like it was open in 1906, World War II or something was happening. So they took the hospital over and brought in the military. Then it turned back into a psychiatric ward.
Actually, I'm going to go piss real quick.
What's crazy about that story is it shut down in the 90s and they just let all the patients out. And that's what I found out, that when a psychiatric hospital shuts down in Canada, they don't send the patients to another hospital because there's no room. They literally open the doors and let them go. Which you'll say to me, no, that's bullshit. I swear to God it's true.
Cucumbers.
And not only is it true, they still have support groups in town, down here, where they just fucking still meet to this day. There's like elderly people in town that are absolutely insane walking around. And they're living in like shelters. And it's because they lived in the hospital and they just let them go. Darkside says, I live in St. Thomas. Dude, where? Darkside? What? Have I met you? How do I know you? He says, yeah, it's true. I live in St. Thomas. So yeah, it's fucking insane. So when I found that out, there's this story that you guys like to hear these haunted stories and stuff. So I'll tell this. In Toronto, the Humber College, that fucking place has this story about this mythology, which didn't actually happen. But maybe it did, because there's like weirdness about it that I can't figure out. Yeah, Canadian can confirm it's dumpster fire there. Canadian nurses trained there. Yeah, yeah. Thank you for the beard comment. The photos are very Dude, you got to look up St. Thomas Hospital, like bird's eye view. It's massive. But in Toronto, when that psychiatric ward shut down, apparently one of the people killed a bunch of the nurses, which is like this whole thing, this whole story.
How much to play Forspoken? I'll do it on YouTube so I could say the number 200, and I'll buy it and play it. I'll switch over to YouTube right now. I know Jay's tired. He probably wants to go to bed naked.
Not yet. Yeah, I live about a block from the dollar store. Darkside, dude, somebody lives in the same town as me.
Darkside. Oh, I thought it was Darkside Phil.
Yeah, Darkside Phil lives in. Dude, Darkside, do you have me on Twitter? So, anyways, going into this hospital, learning the fucking stories was just, it was terrifying, man. No, sadly.
How many subs do we get tonight, guys? Thank you. Holy shit, we went from like 270 to 315. That is insane.
When I was a kid, my parents would take me to a sister at work in the hospital with hospice. It's creepy as fuck. Yeah, I should add you, though. Yeah, Darkside, add me, man. Go on Twitter, make an account, add me there. It's at JHoofed. Well, I just want to finish the story about this hospital so you guys can go to bed and fucking cry yourself to sleep. So the guy that was giving the tour of this hospital, look it up again, St. Thomas Psychiatric Hospital. He told us maybe about 6 or 7 stories while we walked around the place. The place was there from 1906 till it's still there. The issue with the hospital is it's so fucking massive that they can't tear it down. It would cost millions of dollars to tear down, so it's cheaper to just let it sit there and rot. Essentially, it's also a heritage building now, so it can't be torn down because it's over 100 years old. So the city owns it. I think the city bought it and sold it to a company for like $1 in some weird deal to get it preserved. So just imagine, guys, if you can possibly do this. It's very hard to imagine how big this place is, but picture like a three-story apartment building. It's pretty, like, think of a big one with like, I'd say about 16 to 20 units in it, right? This place is the equivalent of like that times, I would say 30 or 40 or 50. It's
Jesus Christ.
It's so massive that it's got underground tunnels. So here's some of the stories. I'll just tell these quickly and then we'll fuck off. First story. A first story which was absolutely insane was...
Look what Grunk Libs wrote.
My fiancé died with my kid inside. I had to identify the body.
Oh, Jesus.
Well, that's fucking sorry. That's gruesome. Jay, when's your book coming out? I should write a book. So, yeah, look. The Dark Side's telling some of the stories. He goes, yeah, the hospital's really fucking scary. Apparently, they tortured people with disabilities in the 80s in there because they thought they were doing some sort of demon shit was happening because it's super fucking religious in this town. Okay, I'll follow up that story with, I was in the room where they did the fucking experiments on disabled people. And I'll tell you this much. The guy didn't tell us which stories happened in which rooms, but even my roommate, when we went in this one room, we both had the same fucking feeling that something shitty happened there. So we went in the room, and it was dead silent because it was soundproof. So it was an electrical room. It's where they did electroshock therapy on disabled people in the 80s in this hospital because they thought it was curing them. Obviously, it didn't do jack shit.
They used to think lobotomy is curing people, too.
Exactly. So I'm standing in this room that's fucking pitch black, number one. Number two, it's dead silent because there's maybe about 4 inches of concrete on each side of the room. But then on top of it, it's a room built in a room. And Rich obviously knows studios, so you can't hear shit.
Yeah, the noise isolation is insane.
This fucking room felt like misery. I don't know how to describe it. It just felt like misery. I remember thinking like, oh, some fucked up shit happened in here. And as we left the room, the guy was like, yep, this is where they did the They did all the essentially torturing of disabled people. And I was like, okay, that makes sense. That makes sense. Great. So that was one story of that place. Now, the creepiest story that we have out of that place, which I got to experience for myself, I didn't see anything, but so this guy's worked at the hospital since the 1960s. He's pretty old. He's worked there as a janitor, then he worked there as a handyman. He worked with, remember back in the 60s, nurses couldn't be handymen. It was like it was frowned upon. Like, so if you were female, you were a fucking nurse, that's it. You couldn't work in the hospital as anything else. However, he told me this amazing story about this girl who decided to work there as a fucking sort of like a janitor. But she had to do it sort of undercover because they didn't allow it. So she got paid as a nurse, but she was a janitor, which made no sense to me, but it's true. I fucking saw with my own eyes because I got to hold her name tag. So I said, well, what's the story with her? So here's the kicker about this whole hospital, which is fucking scary. This place is full of asbestos, and a whole slew of the staff died from cancer. Tons of them.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
So meanwhile, I'm in the fucking hospital. He's like, well, don't worry. We haven't done any renovations, so it's not in the air. So I'm like, great. That's probably why my heart's fucking falling out of my chest. But anyways, we're in this basement. He tells me the story. He goes, I've only experienced 4 paranormal things down in this basement. And he goes, one of them is the name tag of that woman. And I said, well, what happens? He goes, she used to come down here and change out of her nurse's uniform into a fucking janitor uniform, and she'd clean all the hallways in the basement. And they'd hide her down here, and they gave her a job that way. And I was like, wow, that's such a weird story. What happened to her? Oh, well, in the 80s, she died of cancer. I'm like, oh, that's terrible. And I said, well, what's the story about this? And he said, well, she's still here. And
They used to put asbestos in everything, man.
Yeah, that was fucked, dude. I said, what do you mean she's still here? And he said, well, he goes, I'm the only one that comes into this basement now. He goes, my job takes about 6 hours a week. I walk around the whole hospital once a week, and I make sure essentially nothing is flooded, because that's how a giant flood happened in the middle of winter, and it destroyed one of the whole wings of the hospital. They actually had to shut it down because of the asbestos. So he goes, it's my job to make sure there's no flooding. He goes, it's also my job to make sure no one's broken in, anything, da-da-da-da. And I'm like, okay. He's like, so every time I come down here, I find her name tag in a different spot. I'm like, oh, that's fucking crazy.
Bizarre.
So he goes, follow me. And dude, we're already in a basement. It's already pitch black. We go into like a room in a room in a room. Remember, this place is it's like Resident Evil, the Hive. It's gigantic. So I'm already terrified. We go into a room and he goes, here. And he picks up the fucking name tag. It's from the 80s. He gives it to me. I hold this name tag of this woman who's dead. He goes to me,
You're fucking nuts. I wouldn't have even have done that.
Yeah, I mean, it was fucking terrifying, but I was like, sure. Like, because like I believe in paranormal because I've seen a couple of things that I'm just like,
I do believe in it. I haven't personally experienced it, but I do believe in it.
So I'm holding the name tag of this dead woman, and he goes, put it in her jacket pocket, and I guarantee you, I'll find it on the sink, and I'll send you a photo in like 2 weeks. So we're like, okay, sure. So we carry on stories. He tells me about this giant furnace. So back in 1902 or 1906 when the place opened, the only way they could heat this whole fucking place was to have furnaces that were roughly the size and the weight of a city bus on its end. And they had 6 of them. Now, at the time when I was there, they only had 3 left. And they're so massive. So he goes, okay, there's a story that happened near the burners. And I'm like, oh, no, I don't want to hear this story. He's like, well, I don't need to go into detail. So I'm like, I said to him, you know what? Go into detail. I want to hear it. He's like, in 1907, there was a man in charge of all of this that you're looking at. And I'm standing in the room, and I'm like, okay. He's like, follow me. So he's like, stand right. So I stand where he tells me to stand. And he goes, the spot you're standing is where the foreman's son died. And I'm like, okay, what happened? He's like, one of the fucking steel doors on the furnace in 1907, while it was on, broke open. It broke open and covered the kid, because it's the size of a bus, covered the kid in hot coals, and he was buried alive in hot coals and died right where you're standing.
Oh my God.
And
Holy
I was like,
shit, what a painful death.
I was like, oh, that's great. That's great. And he's like, yeah. He's like, do you want to see what's even scarier? I'm like, not really. He's like, do you want to see the sewer system of this place? And I'm like, kind of. He's like, okay, follow me. Dude,
just to make sure you really were exposed to asbestos, but continue.
Yeah. Him and I were, so my roommate and I were already, what's the name of the place? It's called St.Thomas Psychiatric Hospital. We were already 2 floors below, 3 floors below ground level. So imagine that, 3 floors down. I'm in this room where you look up and you see the furnaces, and the furnaces are fucking so tall that you can't see the top of them. But you could
covered in asbestos, because they used to cover furnaces in
Oh
asbestos.
yeah, it was disastrous. So there was 3 of them left, and you could see like the windows at the top floor, but it was 3 stories up. So I was 3 stories down. He leads us again, a story down again. And I fucking couldn't believe what he did. He opened a door that was metal, and it was so rusted. I remember he had to like kick it in. He opened the fucking door, and there was 1 million liters of water. This is where the water was stored. It was a 1 million liter tank, 4 stories underground that you could walk into. And that's what the first time I said, no, I'm passing on this one. Because he opened the door, and you'll never, I don't think anyone in this chat or anywhere will experience anything like this unless you do literally what I did. But standing 4 stories down and yelling into a 1 million liter tank, it's essentially the size of 2 football fields, 4 stories down.
1 million liters is nuts. Yeah.
And it's also about 12 feet deep. And it's not like you open the door and you could look in and see anything. You had to shine a flashlight. And dude, it was like Resident Evil. It was just a fucking walkway that was hanging over the tank. Not like you were walking next to the tank. It was hanging over the tank, built in 1907. And it was all rusted. And he was like, you want to walk down this? No. It was full of water still. Like 6 feet of water. And the water hadn't been moved for, he said, probably 10 years. And it was crystal clear because all the sediment and all the minerals dropped to the bottom. So you could shine a flashlight down into a tank, and it was the most terrifying thing I think I've ever experienced, because if you fell in that tank, they couldn't get you out. You would just have to float there until fucking they rescued you somehow. It was the most terrifying thing I've ever experienced. So that was amazing in the hospital. And here's the last story I'll tell, then we're getting the fuck out of here. This one was pretty cool because I said to him, I go, have you, you've done other tours. Has anyone else ever seen anything in this hospital? And he's like, oh yeah. He's like, yep. He's like, I got one more story. Follow me. So he takes us to the psychiatric, the criminology, female criminology division, which is where they would take all this Canadian serial killers that were female. So any woman that killed over, I forget like how many he said, he told a whole story about it. But basically, if a woman killed a bunch of people, they'd end up in this hospital in Ontario from Canada. And he's like showing us around, and it's just a typical 1907 fucking hospital thing. And I go, okay, so what's the story about other people here? He goes, you know how they used to hang curtains around, like bed sheets around beds back in the day? Like you'd go into the hospital and they would move the sheet. I go, yeah. And he goes, well, look up on the ceiling. You see all those sort of tracks. And I'm like, yep. He's like, those tracks used to be sheets. So everywhere in the hospital where you see those tracks, those used to be fucking sheets. And I said, okay, that makes sense. He goes, well, they all obviously rotted away. He goes, but when I used to walk around here in the 90s, those sheets used to still be hanging here. So I'm like, oh God, I know where this is going. Because I got my intuition is like peaking. So I said to him, let me take a wild guess you saw some of the sheets move. He goes, dude, we're walking, I'm giving a tour just like I'm giving you a tour now. And we look into a room. And he goes, all four of us see one of the sheets lift up like somebody's walking under it, holding it above their head, and then letting it go. He goes, there's no fucking air. He goes, this is a cell. These are cells. There's no fucking windows. There's no air circulation. It was built in 1907, so there's no internal air systems. The way they used to do it would be all of the cells would have a door with another gate on top of it, and they used to blow air into that they used to get ice. I know this sounds lunacy, but they'd put ice above doors and blow it into rooms for air conditioning. And he's like,
yeah, that's before they had refrigeration, so yeah.
Yeah, so I was baffled. I'm like, well, I don't know how so he's like, I physically saw a sheet lift to 6 feet in the air and completely drop, like somebody held it up. And he goes, nothing was there. And then he goes, then my wife was with me with the people we were giving a tour, and right between the wife and the tour person, right between their ears, they're standing next to each other, something said in their ears, get the fuck out of here, in their ears. Not like it was yelled. Somebody just whispered it, get the fuck out of here, in their ears, and they got the fuck out of there.
That's what it took for them to get the fuck out of there. I would have been out of there way before that.
So you know what? Sorry. I have to tell a kicker, because I always like to tell little kickers about this story, right? There's a story about this place that's mythology now. It's not proven, but a lot of people believe in this story. In the 80s, before it shut down, there was a teenage girl, blonde, blue eyes, completely gorgeous. I saw her in the newspaper, went missing from the hospital, right? Never found her body, never found out where she went. This is before it shut down. So here's what's crazy about this story. So the tour guide has worked in the hospital since the 60s, right? I already told you guys that part. He knows all the people that have worked there, the fucking guy that ran the director, the head fucking, the head doctor who worked there. This story is the part that still to this day gives me shivers to think about because of what I'm assuming happened. So in the 80s, this girl just disappeared. Police got involved. They searched for her for a very long time. Searched all of the fucking lakes, all of the everything around the hospital. Couldn't find this girl. They assumed that she just got away. So as we were walking by, remember guys, I like to study things, so I know where everything is in this hospital. And as we walk by this window, it's by the way, it's all Art Deco. So it's like they like revamped it over the years. So we're walking by these weird windows. So if you've ever seen the movie, like, trying to think of a movie, I don't know, doesn't matter. But the windows are all fucking weird, gothic, Art Deco shit. I look out the fucking windows and I go, oh, that's where the pool used to be. Because this place used to have certain levels of people. So there'd be people in there that killed people, but then there'd be people there that just like robbed somebody with a gun, but was mentally ill. So they went to the hospital. Because back in those days, if you fucking shit in a river, they'd send you to the hospital. If you coughed on a woman's face, they'd send you to the hospital. Like, they'd send anybody, like if you said, oh, I feel like my mind is weird, you'd go to the hospital.
And you would stay there involuntarily.
Yeah, you'd stay there for the rest of your life, essentially. So, as we were walking by this window, I go, that's where the fucking pool used to be. And he goes, yeah, I still remember the days that it was filled in, concrete. And, dude, I swear to God, something in my, like, I know this sounds insane to you guys, but my intuition, I have very good intuition. And something in my brain said, oh, the woman who went missing in the 80s is buried under the pool. Guaranteed. She's in the concrete, 100%. And I started to put two and two together in my head. But then all of a sudden I thought, oh, the guy that's fucking standing here telling us this story about the girl gone missing he's involved. That's all I said to myself in my head. I just, because I think wild, crazy fucking ideas, right? So he keeps telling this story, and the way it's like, I watch a lot of fucking serial killer documentaries, and the way that serial killers go back to the crime scenes to get some sort of enjoyment out of it, like watching the cops do their work, watching the cops stumble over clues, trying to figure out who has done it. Meanwhile, the killer's in the room with them. That type of shit. And I'm not saying that this guy was involved directly or anything like that, but the way he told the story and the way he had a smirk on his face when he said that she hadn't been found yet, I still get chills down my spine, and I'm not making this up and trying to be fucking like a know-it-all or psychic or anything like that. I'm not psychic. I'm not anything. But if I felt that, and even my roommate, who you guys know, who talks in the background, he felt something weird. Something weird happened there, where my theory is that something happened to this girl, because there was reports that women were the R word in this hospital by the nurses. Something bad, something bad happened to her. And smirk. What did I say? Yeah, he had a smirk on his face. And
because they're considered clinically insane, so who's going to believe him? So
absolutely. Absolutely. So they could grab a girl, bring her into a room, do whatever they want to her. Which, if you follow anything true crime, that's what happened to all of them. Like, that's what happened in all hospitals back in the 70s and 80s.
It's insane.
Horrible. So here's what's crazy about the story. As I'm standing there in that fucking moment, I remembered that if you go on YouTube and search Psychic St. Thomas Hospital, there was a TV show that filmed in there 1 year after it shut down in 94, maybe 95. And in that show, there was a psychic who said there was a woman missing on the grounds and he could sense her. And when he got to the part where the pool was, he said that he felt her presence the most there. So I'm standing in front of a guy who was around that time. He's smirking like he's getting off telling a story about how this woman disappeared, and I remember him saying, like, if something bad happened to her, they never found out who it was. Like, that type of shit.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking to myself, like, this is he telling the story this way to just get us all riled up? Or is he like does he give tours to people knowing that he's involved with this, getting away with it, and he gets off all these years later telling people that, this woman is missing? So I fucking look at the guy like, I'm done here. Like, I'm actually done with the tour at this point, because I'm getting this weird dude. And at this point, it started thundering outside, and it was just too much for me. I thought, I'm getting out of here. So we were basically at the fucking opening of the place. So I was like, I'm done. We're done. We're done here. Soon as I got outside, I turned to my roommate. I'm like, you fucking tell me, look me in the eyes. You tell me, swear on my life, you don't think that was fucking weird. And he was like, he's a skeptic of everything. And for him to say that he thought something was a little weird with that part, he said that. And I was like, I fucking knew it. I knew it. So I did research after. I did a ton of research after. And a girl went missing in the 80s, didn't find her. My theory is this, and then we're done here tonight. I'm not coming back down here. My theory is that something horrible happened to her. I don't think the guy that was giving the tours was necessarily involved with what happened to her, but I think he helped cover it up. And I just had fucking intuition out of it. And I'm like, so every time I tell this story, I always tell that part of it because it's the best part. I'm like, now the tour guide that gives tours there is a fucking part of it. And to this day, there's something about this fucking hospital. When we drive by it to get ice cream, I look at this place and it's like something is calling me. And in terms of like paranormal, when a building is calling you, I don't necessarily believe in all this stuff, but when there's a building that's calling to you, quote unquote, it's usually like demonic presence that's trying to like suck people in. And I mean, if we're going to be honest about all this stuff and talk about it, I feel like the building is calling to me still to this day because I was in it. Like there's something, and it's not like I feel like something is in the building calling me. I feel like it's the fucking building saying, "Hey, come hang out with me again." And it's like this fucking peaceful calm. Like Rich and I both have like panic disorder, so it's super rare where Rich and I are like actually calm. Being in that building felt like the most calm I felt in my life. But when you leave, it's like something about the building is like, come back. The building wants my anus, somebody said in the chat.
Listen, I'm going to come on your back.
Cheers.
All right, dude, that's crazy. That's a wild fucking story.
I got more. Listen, guys, I got more stories about that place I didn't tell tonight. There's 2 more. Wait until you hear those ones, but we're going to save that. Sexual horror stories, the hospital. Oh, you guys like the hospital? Yeah. Yeah, a lot of you are probably waiting for the second part of that story at the hospital, but I don't know how many of you know the first part. Were you at the other stream? So there was a huge hospital very close to where I live called the St. Thomas Psychiatric Hospital. Did you guys hear that story? I think a lot of you might have been there. Okay, quite a few of you in the chat are saying yes. That is Canadian. Yes, it is. I am in Canada. The panic attack one? No. Am I currently high? No. Okay, so a lot of you did. Wow. Let's see if Rich wants me to tell that.
What?
Remember I was telling the story about the St. Thomas Psychiatric Hospital. They want to know the rest of the story because I only told a couple of them.
So tell the rest. That's fine.
Yeah, Spooky Noob says the tour guide killed the missing girl. Yeah, that story with my creative imagination. So let me fill in the people. Let me literally fill you in, all of you, if you know what I'm saying. Let me fill you in. Let me fill you in the story. So if you want to look it up, it's called actually, are we able to link out of here? We're not, right?
No, it's set up by design.
Okay, hang on. Let me get the name of the hospital so you guys can...
Jay's going to Pornhub right now to look up deep fake porn of Pokemon. I can't believe that guy got caught looking at it. And he works with those streamers, dude.
Okay, I'm putting it in the chat. That's what it's called. Look it up on Google and look at the images if you want to follow along. If you look up images, you'll see the place. Yeah. Look up images, guys. You'll see how big it is. There's like a bird's eye view, and there's a couple of other ones. So that's the name of the hospital. Look it up. You'll see. Like the fifth photo. So this hospital was built in 1903. It's over 100 years old now, so it's protected by the government. You cannot tear it down. This means that the building essentially was owned by the city at one point. It's permanently closed. It is gigantic. You have to look it up. It's gigantic. Long story short, that hospital has been sitting there for about 20 years, I believe, since 1990-ish, 1996 maybe. Maybe a wing of it might have been open at a certain time. But there's lots of stories that took place there, blah, blah, blah. So, I got to go through it. So if you're just tuning in, I told some stories about walking through the building and experiencing a few weird things, but I left out a few of the best parts. So, is the chat like dead? What happened there? Weird.
No, it's just people stopped talking for a bit. That's all.
Did you see rats? No, actually, it's a pretty clean building. as my cat scares the shit out of me. So there's a lot of movies that were filmed there. If you watch Jason Momoa's show it's literally called I. It was filmed there. They also filmed How to Tell Stories in the Dark, which came out a couple of years ago. Oh, you guys are just listening. Cool.
Yeah.
Sorry. So that came out a few years ago. If you watch that movie, there's a scene in the film where one of the young characters gets trapped in sort of a long hallway, and that big fat blob woman type character comes up and hugs them from four corners. That's filmed in the main hallway of the psychiatric hospital I was in. Yeah, sorry, it was S. Yeah, it was named C. S-E-E, yeah. So, long story short, I got to go on a tour of this place while it was thundering, and it was about 9 a.m. We went into the building. It was pouring rain. It was incredible to walk through this place, but it has a ton of asbestos throughout the building. If you guys look up the actual building, it is riddled with asbestos.
Everything was riddled with asbestos from that time period, man. They used to cover furnaces in asbestos, like they looked like they had icing on them.
Jay, I sent you a Steam game. Flashback Turtle. Oh no, what did you do? I love you, Flashback, but what did you do? Let's look this up quick. You've received a copy of. Well, it's loading. Jerry Rice and and football. What is this?
What
is this?
Dude, there's such weird games out there. My kids play this game called Deer Simulator. It is the weirdest fucking thing I've ever. It makes Goat Simulator seem normal.
Dude, he sent me a game about. It's called Dog Football. It's like dogs playing football. Okay. Yeah. Nitrous or something. Dog football or something. I don't know. I didn't read it quick enough. But thank you. Turtle always sends me the weirdest games on Steam. Appreciate it.
Listen, play Shower with Your Dad Simulator.
Yeah, he sent me that too. Of course
he did.
Yeah, he did. He actually did. So, this hospital, to get an idea of how big it is essentially the size of, I'm going to guess here, probably about 20 to 30 football fields. If you were to, like, line 3 of them across and then at least, I'm going to say 7 of them back. That's how big the building is. And it's not the whole piece of land. And there's tunnels under it. You know, nurses used to use these bikes going between the buildings, the different wings, because it took 15, 20 minutes to walk from one end to the other inside the building, Rich. Like, imagine that for a second. Imagine you lived in a house where it actually took, like, 20 minutes to walk down a hallway.
How large do they have measurements of the place? How long it is or how big it is, like your cock?
Yeah, 6.9 feet.
If your cock is 6.9 feet, you have a problem.
No, I just sling it over my shoulder. So,
all right. Anyway, continue because I'll derail it by talking about what I was about to say.
Come listen, explore. Somebody, Juan in the chat says, "Listen, come explore my tunnels."
Listen, if you
good.
were 6.9 feet, you could the SWAT team could use you as a battering ram. Let's go.
Yeah, listen. So, as you go into the building, it's the foyer. And if you've seen the movie How to Tell Scary Stories in the Dark, that's the main hallway. There's a red light in that hallway. So when we got into the building, the guy said, "Do you want to take a short tour or a long tour?" Of course, I said, "Let's take the long tour," because I love paranormal stuff, and I had heard stories about this place. To get into this fucking building was 1 in a million. The story of getting into it was incredible. We were legitimately with the guy who took care of the building. So let me explain what happens because he told us all of this stuff. He just sent another game? Oh, God. What is it?
Pause to see. I think we missed some super chats.
Yeah, go ahead.
DSP face. All I can hear is the Half-Life 2.
How is that a game?
What? Can we please watch Kirby? Oh, let me send me the video and I'll check it out.
He just sent me a game called Fap and Cum.
Dude, there's like hardcore porn almost on fucking I mean, I like some of the top selling games is like, what is it called? Waifu? I don't fucking know. And it's like fucking anime character simulator. Phil is a nightmare where he's running away from a giant Burger King chicken sandwich. Play Phil screeching, please. All right, everyone buckle up because this is the most annoying sound on the planet. Oh my God. How is he not a cartoon? Reminding me of the movie Session 9, Jeffrey Tucker says to you.
Dude, if you've seen Sessions 9, then you've been in the building with me. That's exactly what this building is like. So Blair Witch Project became a huge movie. The guy named Josh out of that the guy named Mike helped produce Sessions 9. Is it Session 9 or Sessions 9? I think it's Sessions 9. If you've seen Session 9, or whatever it's called, that film is exactly what I experienced. Not the killing and all that stuff, but that's how it felt like to be in this building. So, as we went through the building, I was going to explain how we got into the building. Basically, my friend fixed a computer for an old lady. The old lady was like, I used to work at this hospital. And we were like, oh my God, can you get us in? She's like, yes, my brother takes care of the place. So she literally phoned him on the, obviously.
Wait, hold on. They upkeep that place?
Yeah, so let me explain this. This building is from 1903 in Canada, and it's the biggest building, I think the biggest hospital in North America, from my understanding. There might be a bigger one in the States by a little bit, but it's the biggest psychiatric hospital, at least in Canada.
We used to have a billion of those fucking places where people were involuntarily held.
Yeah, it's the same thing that happened here. So it is old. A lot of people died in the building. I'll get into that as we go through the story. So they used to have tunnels underneath. That was for two reasons. Number one, so the other patients didn't have to see the deceased patients leaving the building. Number two, because this had over 1,500, I got to get this right, 13 to 1,500 inmates, as they were called. So you guys think about this for a second. 1,300 patients. So that meant...
Holy shit.
That meant there had to be at least 700 staff. 700 staff there daily. That's how big this place was. So going into this building after it's been closed for 20 years is terrifying because you assume the worst. Obviously, you assume there's something's going to be in this building, sounds, and... I mean, I'll never experience anything like this ever again in my life. I'll never get to go... I drive by it almost every day, but I'll never get to go inside again. I mean, maybe I could go in again, but the chances of me going in the building again are basically zero. So I knew that... Well, I tried to film it, J-Ram, in the chat. He's saying, did you film it? No. Legally, we shouldn't have been there. But I didn't want to be the asshole to be like, can we film this or can we take photos? I just wanted to be there for the experience. So I had my phone, of course, but I didn't film or take photos because I didn't want to be the rude person because we're getting in the building and I didn't just want to be that person. So first and foremost, I asked him how many movies filmed there, and he goes, not a lot. And I said, why? Like, why wouldn't there be a lot of people coming here to film in here? It's incredible. And he goes,
interesting.
He goes, because the insurance cost $2.6 million just to walk in the door. And I went, oh, okay, that's why. That's why.
Why would it be so expensive just to walk in the
because
fucking
it's
door?
asbestos. So
so they would have to do.
They would have to bring in teams of people for safety.
Decon.
Yeah, it's basically Sessions 9. They'd have to come into the building and spray it down and make sure that none of the paint dislodged from the wall. If somebody bumped into the wall with some machinery or whatnot, you can't drill into the walls. You can't do anything because you would literally be exposed to asbestos. So,
bro, they used to put asbestos in the filters of cigarettes.
Yeah, I know. It's insane. So if you don't know what asbestos is, it's essentially very small particles of a material that if you breathe it in, it's like breathing in super small shards of glass, essentially, into your lungs, which cause tons of issues in your lungs and would essentially kill you. from bleeding, from cancer, from all sorts of things. So asbestos back in the day was used as
Everywhere.
as sort of like a fire, like it's what did they used to do?
It's they call it a fire retardant.
Yeah. Sorry, I couldn't think of the bloody name.
They used it in they even made to put around a Christmas tree, I believe it was like in the 40s or 50s, asbestos snowflakes to put around your Christmas tree, and they would be safe. Could you imagine?
Because they used to think back in the day that asbestos was this like be all end all magical thing, and they didn't realize that if you breathe it in, it's killing you. Like tons of people. It's called the St. Thomas Psychiatric Hospital. I'll put in the chat again if you want to look it up. So, I don't want to take the whole stream for this story, but I think you guys love these stories. But
please do. It's giving me a break, and it's interesting.
Yeah. So I could tell you some history. So it was built in 1902, and then in 1907, I believe, during one of the wars, the army took it over, so it became a military base. That whole building became a military base, and there were soldiers placed in the military base there. Then after, I think in 1920-something, it turned back into an actual hospital. That's where it gets interesting, because if you follow the paranormal fields or you follow sort of the history of psychiatric hospitals, as Rich said earlier, psychiatric hospitals, for the most part, were nonsense. It was a place to put people that society didn't want to really deal with. So if you were handicapped in certain ways, or you were mentally disabled in certain ways, and your parents couldn't deal with you, and you went to the hospital, the doctor would put you in this place,
and you'd be held involuntarily.
Yeah,
Same with it was even worse in the States, I believe.
Oh, it was lunacy. Well, you know what? The States has a bad rap for that too, because of all the quote unquote experiments that took place.
Lobotomies
in like 1920s and 30s. But there's a lot of, I could bring up a whole bunch of hospitals that are insane, like tuberculosis. This is a side story I'll tell very quickly. Tuberculosis was so massive as a pandemic back in the day that everybody watching this, including Rich and myself, probably has some of that in our system. Like, that's how much it spread. It spread to a degree so far that it mutated into nothing. However, I never knew this, but if you are a nurse that works in at least North America, you have to get a tuberculosis shot still in 2020. And that is because all of us have it, because that's how far that virus went. So, anyways, that's just an interesting story, because tuberculosis was a big deal in the States, and also in...
What was the other name? Was it called consumption? Because tuberculosis is a bacteria, I believe.
Yeah.
And they used to have what was like consumption camps. How the hell are we getting it? It all ties together, but
no, it's fine. No, because they had camps. Really, that's what the hospital was turned into during the tuberculosis. Yeah, it was during the so tuberculosis came along, and they turned these psychiatric wards also into hospitals for TB. So, all of us have tuberculosis in our system.
Yeah, consumption was TB. I thought so, Jeffrey. Yeah. And they used to have, because they used to say before, I'm sorry to cut you off, Jay, and Jason Poole will get to you in a second. Jerry Rice game is a port from the Wii. I have no idea what the Jerry Rice game is. We probably talked about it before, but I forgot. My apologies. They used to have, like, because they said that breathing, when you had consumption or tuberculosis, go into these like mountainous areas where camps were, and breathing the fresher air would make you survive longer.
Yeah. It was nonsense. Yeah, there's a very famous hospital, which I can't think of the name of, in the States. Maybe somebody can put it into the chat, but they do haunted tours there now. It's on the tip of my tongue. I know if you're into this, you know what I'm talking about. Everybody in the paranormal. Yeah, Waverly Hills. That's what it's called. If you guys want to get spooked out, look up Waverly Hills. So, anyways.
Nice sly burp there.
Thank you. So, this is what's amazing. All of these places in the States, you could just like walk through and people own them and blah, blah, blah. So it's not owned by the government. The problem with the St. Thomas Psychiatric Hospital is it's not owned by anybody. Like you can't just do a tour because, again, asbestos. So if you want to film, getting back to the main point here, if you want to film a movie there, it's millions of dollars just because it's dangerous as hell. So this guy, which
Okay, just Spider-Man. I'll get to you in a second. My apologies.
Yeah, Waverly Hills Sanitarium. That's it, man. So there's this guy that works there. His job is to, Rich, you're going to lose your mind over this one, but because it's a protected building in Canada now, it's legally you can't tear it down. They would be sued for millions of dollars because after 100 years, buildings here in Canada turn into quote unquote heritage buildings. And once it's a heritage building, it's protected by the government. And the reason for that is just history. They want to preserve history. Also, the problem is tearing down the building would cost 100, 200, 300 million dollars because of the asbestos and because it's
you
so
got to handle it properly. Yeah.
Yeah, tearing the building down would take years. First of all, they've already tried to plan it out, and they said they can't do it. There's no way they can do it, and they can't turn it into living. They can't change it to anything because they can't cut into the fucking walls. It's all asbestos. So once it's airborne, that's when the issue is, right?
Yeah.
I forget what the guy told us. It's something like it takes a certain amount of time for it to drop to the floor. So I said, going in there, I said, walking in here is okay, right? He's like, oh yeah, I walk through here all the time. He goes just don't kick up any like major dust piles if you see them or anything. And I was like, why? He's like, well, you'll kick asbestos into the air. And he goes, but I've been walking around for years in here. He goes, it's clean as a whistle because it's been sitting there for years and they keep it going. So how it works is this. In the summertime, they open the windows. In the wintertime, they actually run a furnace. And it takes 3 furnaces the size of 3 cities' buses sitting up on their ass end of coal. And they've converted them now to gas, I think, what he said. I actually stood outside of one of them. I told that on the last stream. And it's scary. Standing next to a furnace the size of a fucking bus is terrifying. I'll get to that, though. So
That was probably covered in asbestos, too.
oh, it was.
I bet you.
The whole fucking building was dangerous because it was built.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Was the furnace like covered in like white? Like did it have a glaze on it?
No, it was black. They glazed it with like a black rubberized sort of sealant.
Okay.
So it's designed to hold the heat in, but also to not shed off a layer of asbestos everywhere. Because guess what? They used to spray the furnaces with asbestos as well.
Oh, I know. I have a friend who does like HVAC, I think it's called, and he goes and fixes furnaces, and sometimes he goes to old homes, and yeah, they would look like giant marshmallows covered in asbestos to keep the furnace to keep your house from burning down. But it would kill you with cancer, though.
Oh, well, here's what's interesting about this story. So I know a lot about the building itself, but I never knew a lot about the people that sort of work there, right? The idea was that back in, say, 1920 and then all the way to the 60s, they would switch over directors. So there'd be a main guy or girl, mostly guy, because back in the day, women were not allowed to be in any authority figure. It was... I don't want to get into that part because it's exactly what you assume it to be. Super sexist, all that crap back in the day. So you'd have a director who would be in charge of the whole place. Sort of, if you've seen the Shawshank Redemption, same idea as a warden. He'd be in charge of the whole place.
Good night, Jeffrey.
Yeah, it would have to be... It's set up like a city. That's what people don't understand when they're this big. I want you to just think for a second. Sit back and think you're in charge of 1,300 patients. Some of them have killed people. A lot of them have killed people. A lot of them have stabbed people, murdered people. The most ridiculous crimes that have taken place, the people go there. There's nowhere else in Canada. So you're in charge of all of that. You're in charge of the staff. You're in charge of making sure there's no corruption within the staff. And unfortunately, back in the 80s and the 70s, there was a lot of stories going out. Rich sort of touched upon this last time, but tons of terrible things happen because it's a lot of men taking care of women in these places. So, yeah.
Yeah, and who's going to believe them?
And no one's going to, it's, you can't deny the fact that no one's going to believe anybody in there because it's a mental hospital. So families would visit these children and these women, and the women might say, oh, I was touched by somebody, but no one's going to believe them.
Or worse.
Or, well, let me just say this, way worse than that. So in 1980, a woman went missing. I already told my theory on that one, but a woman went missing, and then they also, in the same year, covered a pool up with cement. So you guys can do math on that one. So this place had to have everything. It had to literally be a city. So this means that it had its own furnaces, it had water tanks, sewer system, it had obviously its own butcher. So listen to this part of the story. Absolutely insane. Back behind the hospital, if you see the photos, again, I'll put it in the chat, you can look it up. St. Thomas Psychiatric Hospital. If you look at the field out back of the hospital, that used to be a barnyard setting. So there was also somebody on site who was a farmer who ran a farm. So some of the patients in, say, 1920, if they were in good behavior, they'd go out to the farm and feed cows, feed pigs, and chickens. All of those animals supplied food for the hospital. You got to keep in mind, 1920 and 30, you couldn't go to the grocery store, really, and feed 1,300 people. So you'd have to create a system. So now you guys start to get a picture of how big this place was. They were butchering their own cows. I was in the butcher shop within the hospital, and there's a room in there where they literally bleed out the animals. And I went into that room, and you could still smell the spices from 1920 that they used to put on the meat. It still smelled like a deli. It was fucked up.
Jesus, that's weird.
Yeah, man, they had giant rails that went down.
What's up, Mike Wells?
They went these giant rails that used to have hooks on them, and they would butcher. They bring a cow in, and this is 100% real. Bring a cow in from the farm. They'd butcher it in the hospital itself. They'd hang it up on these hooks, and they'd bring different parts of the cow around the hospital, and there'd be different sections where they would cook it. Because remember, it's so big, this hospital, that they had to have this, how can I explain this in a way you guys would understand? The kitchen was about the size of half of a gym, like a school gym. We've all been in a gym. So picture the half of a gym with a line, and I mean a huge line of, dishwashing, stoves, cooks, cooking equipment, refrigerators. Going into this place was just terrifying. So we went through the kitchen, which was very awkward because you see the giant hooks. You see where the cows used to come out of the fucking freezers and then go to another section to be cut up and stuff. And he showed me the dock where they would bring the animals in from the back of the hospital. So that was also incredibly interesting because I'm like, wow, the amount of animals in 40, 50 years that must have come through here is staggering.
That's insane. They actually slaughtered their own animals.
They had to do it. Think about how many people have to be fed. And this is in 1920. Like I said, that's 1,300 mouths. And then guess what? 700 staff, over 2,000 people on site a day.
Did they even have proper I'm not even was refrigeration a thing in the 20s?
No. This is what's crazy. I think they had they'd get
the Iceman used to go around because people didn't have refrigerators. They used to have whatever the fuck they were called, and the Iceman would come every day with a big brick of ice so you could keep your food cool.
Yeah, basically this is what from my understanding, what it was.
Ice boxes. There
was ice boxes, right? But there was also the idea of putting the food into the ground because the ground would hold a colder temperature.
J-Rim.
So, oh yeah, Killer Iceman says Iceman Killer. I know the Iceman Killer. That story's insane. Yeah, you had to salt the meat. Somebody says I think you had to salt. I could still smell the goddamn spices on the meat. And this is like 100 years later, essentially. So walking through there was amazing. I'm going through all the different sections so you guys can sort of get an idea how big it was. So they had to feed 2,000 mouths a day. Not one meal, like 3 meals. Breakfast,
yeah,
breakfast, lunch, and dinner. It was lunacy to see this place. So I'm walking through there. It's the size of a football field, like half of a football field, and I can't believe this place. So I'm in total awe. We're walking through. It's if you've seen The Shining and you've seen the part where Danny is having ice cream with oh God, what's the character's name? In The Shining, he's eating ice cream and he's sort of in the back kitchen area.
I've watched that movie multiple times, but a very long time ago, and I can't remember it.
Yeah, the kid Danny's having ice cream. Oh yeah, Dick Halloran. He's having ice cream with Dick Scatman, and it looks like that, guys. The hospital looks like the Shining Hotel, like the back area of it. So that's what the kitchen looked like back in, those days. So as we're walking through there, he goes, "Where do you want to go next?" And I was interested in the tunnels. So let me get into the tunnels quickly here. The idea of the tunnels was...
Fuck were the tunnels?
Well, you got to think of logistics if you're going to build a city within a complex of buildings, right? If there's that many people walking around the hallways with prisoners that are handcuffed and nurses and doctors and dentists and bankers and all of that stuff, you'd have to have... And keep in mind, there was a dentist that lived there. An actual dentist that lived on site that had a dentist's office in this hospital.
They have doctors on site? I'm sure they did.
Oh, yeah, the doctors lived there. There was doctors that lived on site.
Yeah, I was going to say they had to be there 24/7, so I'm sure.
Yeah, so I'll get to that in a second because that's also lunacy. So you go into the tunnels and you realize that, first thing you realize is that the tunnels were in place for 2 reasons. Number one, again, like I said, so if there was somebody who passed away, they would bring him out through the back in the tunnels, just like they did at Waverly Hills for tuberculosis. They had tunnels in there because they didn't want the patients to see other people dying. So they would bring him down there. He told us one story that was absolutely terrifying about bringing a patient through the top of the hospital because the tunnel elevator was like broken down. And keep in mind, these elevators were built in 1902. And I got to go into one of the elevator shafts to see how crazy it was. I would not get on that elevator if you paid me. It was only a 4-story elevator, but it was terrifying. I got to go into the roof of this place, which was also just insane to step onto the roof. So as you go into the tunnel, you realize that... Sorry, the story's too long. Some people are like, well, shut up. But the story's... I could go on and on about the story, but the tunnel, you go into the tunnel and you realize that the hospital, because Rich brought up earlier, like, how did they heat this place and how do they keep it cool? One of the aspects that you don't think about is nowadays when they build buildings like this, they would have the wiring and all of the plumbing in the walls, not in the floor, right? So back in 1902, they designed these buildings to have a like a basement and then another basement just below it. So what this means is when you go into the actual tunnels, you'll realize, and this is really scary, man. Imagine 20 football fields worth of flooring underneath the first floor. So picture the first floor of the hospital. You go down to the second, into the basement. But the issue is that the basement is about 6 feet deeper than it usually would be. And there's all these little doors along the tunnels. And I said to the guy, what is all this? Like, why are all these access tunnels here? And he goes, oh, that's how they used to access, like, plumbing and electricity. So I just all of a sudden realized as we're in the basement, dude, it was terrifying. I realized that above the basement, but underneath the top floor, the main floor of the hospital was about a 6-foot gap that was a crawl space. So you couldn't stand up in it, but you could sort of get in and sort of like hover down close to the concrete floor. And it was so terrifying because you'd open these huge wooden doors and you're already in the basement, but you'd sort of reach up and open this door and shine your light in. And just guys, just try to imagine this. You shine a light into one of these doors, you could hear a pin drop and echo, but you're shining a light into essentially 12 football fields across. And it's just concrete, and it goes forever. Like, if you were to get into there and somebody closed the door, it would take you 15 minutes to walk to the other side.
Did you? Where was the morgue? I'm sure there was a morgue in there.
Oh, yeah, I'll get to that. So I'll get to that now. So as you look into these openings underneath the main floor, he's like, you want to go in there? I'm like, we're like, nope, we're not fucking going near that. No shot. So here's another aspect of the hospital you don't think about, and that's power. So, like, back in 1912, when they installed, like, actual electricity in this place, not just, like, the beginning of electricity, but
bare-ass wires.
Bare-ass wires. This was insane. He told me a story that it didn't happen at this hospital, but it almost happened.
Pause a second. Yeah, the stream, it's telling me that the stream is buffering. I don't understand. I'm not seeing anything.
I don't see it either.
No, it's saying poor. YouTube is not receiving enough. Whatever. It's the stream looks smooth now.
Are we good?
I think it's still telling me to open the widget, but there's nothing for me to do. Like,
it's fine. Okay.
Yeah.
Let us know if I need to stop, guys.
Yeah.
Are we back? Let me know in the chat. We're good.
We're back.
Good?
We're back. I'm watching it here. We're back.
So, the tunnels are used for multiple reasons. They're used for the dead people. They're using the nurses. So when we went down there, you guys got to keep in mind in 1920 they used to ride those old school bicycles. And there was tons of them sitting around. And I said, what the hell is all this for? And he goes, oh, it's quicker for the nurses. The nurses used to jump on their lunch break on these bikes. And they would go to a lunchroom. And I was blown away by that. I got to touch one of the bikes. The bike was from 1922. And it was like the tires were disintegrated, but the metal frame was still there. And just touching something like that was terrifying. Just because it's so old and you know that all these nurses touched it. And it's just a weird vibe. So here's what I was going to get into. Electricity. Back in the day, it was so dangerous to actually use the electricity in this building. Because it was the infancy of electricity, essentially, in giant buildings, right? So they had to put electricity for this whole giant hospital, man. So think about that. 2,000 rooms, 2,000 people living there. So this means there has to be staff rooms. Yeah, and there was no regulation at the time.
With they used to literally have bare-ass wires that were live.
Well, I'll tell
Victorian homes and shit.
Yeah, I'll tell the story now, which is going to freak some people out. So they pumped so much power into this building. He told us a story. I said, can we go into the electricity room? And he said, no. I said, okay, that makes sense. He goes, there's parts in that room right behind this door. He goes, if you were to touch it, your body would instantly turn to ash. And I said, what? He goes,
I believe it.
He goes, yeah, he goes, there's so much electricity being pumped through the building still from the city, like, because it's so old that they never like revamped it or went back. You would essentially turn into ash in real time with a split second. Your body would disintegrate because of how much electricity would go through you. And I was like, he's like,
it's interesting they still have it live. There has to be some. We went from 900 people to 646 in a millisecond. Is everyone having issues still with the stream? I've never seen it to do that much of a jump. It like went back and forth too.
I don't know.
That was bizarre. Anyway, yeah, but yeah, of course. And they had no.
Yeah, he basically said your body would explode into ash. Like you would just be he said your blood would turn into dust within a split second. You'd be gone.
So, and it's amazing they still have that room live. I guess they have to.
They have to, and it's impossible again to renovate in this building because asbestos. There's too much money involved in it, so it's essentially just shut down. I know it sounds insane because people are like, "Oh no, that would be fixed." They'd come. You guys don't understand. There's so many of these hospitals that were built in the 1900s that are death traps for many reasons. That was one of them. So you couldn't.
And the amount of money you'd have to invest to properly and safely knock them down is staggering, like you said before.
Yeah, it's millions of dollars. So moving along. As you go into the basement, there's old bikes, there's old carts, there's old medicine bottles. It's terrifying down there. But there's also the dentist's office. There's also there was also 3 dentist's offices, and then there was the morgue. And I'll talk about the morgue now because there's a story I never told you guys that he told us. I looked into it, and I'm pretty sure this happened in this place. So back in, obviously, again, 1920s, they didn't want to show the bodies to anybody else. So they would bring them into the tunnels. You could get into the tunnels through tons of different stairwells and certain areas. You want to read that donation?
Yeah, we got a couple of them that came in. First off, there's one from a while back that I missed from Jason Poole. Look up Penhurst State School. It is so creepy. I first heard about it from the show Ghost Adventures. I haven't heard about that. Penhurst State School. Or maybe I did. Or maybe I'm mixing up stories.
I know Penhurst.
My great uncle was stationed at Hashima Island, a famous coal mining island in Japan during World War II. He had to witness other guards beating Koreans on a daily basis. He doesn't want to talk about it now. I'm sure the horrors that we're seeing are incredible. I want Jay to have my children. Talk about total 180 here. I want Jay to have my children to blow bubbles and play games. I can't read the rest. I think these two, even though the sound weird, would be a great around my kids. What did I miss? I think these two, even though they sound weird, would be great around my kids. You mean us?
I think us, maybe.
Yeah, dude. I have 3 kids. I love kids. You know.
So, the way a morgue was set up in 1920 was it was 2 rooms that were only connected by one area. So there's 2 doors, one over here, giant rooms. They were connected just by the refrigerator where they would keep the bodies. And the reason for that was...
Sorry.
What?
Go ahead. I'll type it in the chat.
So the reason that there was 2 rooms was because on one side, the doctors would do autopsies on the bodies and whatever else. The other side would be the viewing area, which was a smaller room. So the family would come through one door, stand there. Somebody would come in and open up this giant freezer door, and you could pull the sheet out, giant slab of metal. The body would be there. So they would close it, and the family would leave. Then the guy would go back in the other room, open his side of...
Oof. Whoa. Why am I not here? Yeah, you went totally blank for a second. Dude, what the fuck is going on?
I don't know.
My internet connection is unstable. Why all of a sudden my fucking internet connection unstable?
I'm being censored, maybe. The government's like, you can't tell this story.
Now everything seems okay. You guys seeing it again?
Am I muted? Check. 1, 2. Touch my peenie.
Let me go live again. See what's... Yeah, we're there. We're there.
Dude, I'm talking about ghosts, and of course the stream died.
Now it's back.
You can hear me?
Yeah.
Dude, I'm in a haunted church, by the way. Let's get this out. Touch me in the top bunk. Put a ghost in my ass. You guys can hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
So, again, the morgue has 2 rooms. One side's for the viewing area. One side's for the doctors. You can open the middle portion of it from either side. That's how they view the bodies. That's also how they would slide the bodies into the viewing room. Also, I'm in a church, and there's probably ghosts here. Actually, you know what? There's nothing funny has ever happened in this church. It's also desanctified, so that means when the priests left, they took the holiness with them. So it's just an empty shell of a building. So, here's the story that he told us while I was standing in the morgue. So in 1973, they were working a shift on the weekend. One of the patients upstairs passed away. They put the patient... actually, 6 patients died within a certain period of time. And I guess back in those days, they did not pick up the bodies right away. So they would store them in the hospital, in a freezer, in the morgue. So, here's what's funny, though. They had too many bodies there. They had one extra one. Somebody died. They didn't know what to do with it. So they decided to put him into the freezer that's in between the viewing room and the mortuary. So that means he's in this freezer that has 2 sides to it that you can open up from both sides.
Oh, Jesus.
So here's the kicker. And this is legitimately, it's insane. So they have 7 bodies down there. One of them's in that freezer. They switch the shift over, and somehow, miraculously, they forget about the body that's in the middle freezer. And the middle freezer decides to stop cooling over the weekend.
Oh, no.
So instead of it being a freezer and being in the middle of summer in like 1960-something, 70-something, it turned into an oven. So, on Monday morning when they came to collect the bodies,
Rotten corpse.
They opened up that freezer and they had to evacuate part of the hospital because of the smell.
Oh, my God. It was probably unbearable.
It was unbearable. So they opened it up. From my understanding, he said there was 2 nurses and a doctor who got physically sick and that had to go home because they opened that fucking freezer. They had to bring a special team in to clean the body out. He said that the body essentially got cooked and it also expanded. It expanded.
Liquefied, I'm sure, too.
Yeah, it liquefied, it expanded, and essentially it exploded. The belly of the corpse exploded in the freezer, which was, in turn, an oven. And he told me this story as I was sitting on the slab of metal that was in that oven freezer. So I asked him, I said, how long did it take to clean and all this stuff? And the details of the story were just terrible, which I don't even want to, I'm going to puke if I get into that stuff. So he showed me the second room where the morgue was, where they essentially cleaned all the blood out. That was all basically a tile room. So they could use what's it called? Like special, back in the day, obviously they didn't have like Mr. Clean. So they'd use like crazy chemicals to clean the blood out of the systems. So what's really crazy, I got to look into like some of the drains because I was fascinated with that. And it was just so eerie to think about how much blood and just gruesome shit went in that mortuary, and thousands of people died over there over the years. Now, this is also a hospital where I'm going to move us up to one of the wings. If you look at the photos on Google, you'll notice that this place had different wings, and each wing was 3 stories. And I think there's 5 of them, or 4 or 5 on each side. I think it might be 4. And the idea of the wings was that each of the wings would house different people. So like the first wing was for offenders that, might have done something terrible, but not too bad. As you got further into the wings, that's where the murderers were kept. Now in the 70s, they turned it into a female only hospital. So it was like a female forensic unit was at the back wing. That's where I got to go next after the mortuary, because he's like, I'll show you the creepiest place in here that he goes, I don't even like to go in here. He goes, I go in, I check to see there's no damage, and I get out. And I was like, what is it? Oh my God, tell me what this is. So Rich brought this up last stream. We were talking about it, but it is the electrocution room, which was used for essentially doing experiments on mentally handicapped patients who had no way to escape this. So the room is soundproof, and it's not soundproof for a medical reason. It's soundproofed so no one will hear people screaming in the room. And that's an actual thing that took place in these 1912 hospitals. So the way that room is set up is you open the door to it, and you could hear a pin drop in there. There's nothing but dead air. It's so weird because you go in there and there's zero echo. So humans aren't used to this. So if you go into a mall, you talk, you're hearing echo. If you go into your bedroom, you're hearing echo. If you go into the bathroom, you're hearing echo. When you go into a soundproof room, you don't hear that echo anymore. And it's one of the most surreal experiences I've had in my life because there's no echo to your own voice. And when people talk, there's no echo. So your voice sounds...
It's almost like being like... the only thing I could relate to that is being in a sound booth where it's almost like it's so soundproof that it's like it gets you claustrophobic no matter how big the room is.
Basically, they've done studies where people have been in rooms like this, and the average amount of time that somebody can actually withstand in one of those rooms, from my memory, is around 4 hours before they go loony bin. It causes every human, like, no one can stand in this room longer. Like, if you were to go into this room for a day, you would not come out the same person. It's one of these weird occurrences that it sucks the air. It feels like it sucks the air, but the sound out of the world. And no, you don't understand what I'm even talking about unless you've been in a soundproof room that was like this. And if you were in there in total darkness, it would essentially feel like you were in a dark void. Like it would just be like nothing is existing anywhere. So I go into this room and he goes, oh, this is where they would strap the people in. And guess what? The fucking chair is still there. Now it's all covered in carpeting because this is just from the 70s. So it's this like weird, fucking... By the way, the delay on this stream is like 20 minutes, it looks like. But anyways, the room itself was like the weirdest room in the it's called the St. Thomas Psychiatric Hospital. I'll put in the chat again if you want to look it up. So that room was the scariest room in the building, and not because of any like paranormal reasons. Rich, can you still hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you fine.
Okay, I just want to confirm because it looks like the video is like super delayed. Unless it's just my stream. I just want to make sure it's...
No,
Let me see. I don't know. Okay, it isn't.
No, you're not at all, dude. You're
okay,
barely... It's normal.
So,
it's normal delay.
So that was the second room we went in that I was freaked out from. The third thing I'll talk about, which is a story I never told last time. Toyota Corolla just donated $10. Says automakers and airline corporations are lobbying Texas is hard to ban high-speed rail. Oh, weird. That seems to be...
and it seems to be working. It's a shame. Taking the train without dealing with traffic is amazing. Yeah, because they big oil and shit, dude. Not to just oversimplify it, but there's money in pollution.
So, whoa, how much does he do?
Fun fact, ExxonMobil knew, like, they had scientists studying climate change in the 70s, and they were like 85% accurate. They knew it was coming, but there was money. They don't care. Who will destroy the fucking planet? Who gives a shit? We're making money. Anyway, continue. Sorry.
Well, getting back into that room, standing in that room, realizing like that much torture essentially went on in these rooms was one of the most surreal sort of experiences in my life. So moving down the hallway, now I'm into the female... what was it technically called? Let me think of the name. It was called the they still had the signs up. It was called the female female burp. What the fuck was it called? Forensic unit, female forensic crime unit or something. I don't know.
Female burp. I'm still staring at Pat's beard. I got to stop staring at his beard. It's aggravating me now.
Touch my beard. So this story is insane because remember in 1905 or whatever or 3 when this was built, they didn't have the usual cells. They would have giant bars like a fucking jail. So they didn't have essentially doors. They would just have bars. So people could... He told me a story in 1950 something. There was a patient that got a bucket of paint. So this is a story that comes out of there. There was a female patient who was suicidal. There was a bunch of people. The janitors were essentially repainting the whole wing. She reached through the bars because one of the janitors was lazy and left a can of paint there. She died because she grabbed the paint from between the bars and drank it all. And I stood where this happened. That was also a terrifying story because that's how a lot of people died in these places because they could not get out. Even if you weren't insane and your family said you were insane, you'd go in here and they'd lock you in 1903.
Oh, yeah. A lot of those people were held involuntarily, 100%.
Yeah, like...
The majority of them were.
Well, in some places in the U.S., if in like 1920, 1930, 1940, if you made a joke at school and you were female and you said, "Oh, I'm a witch, I'll do my magic powers on you," they would throw those people in there. Like, this sounds insane, but you know, like certain women, certain men, I'll say both, they collect those like stupid rocks and gems nowadays and they have mystical powers. If you did that in 1930 to anybody, you said that this rock has a magical power, like it lights up or something, you'd go into jail and it would be a hospital where they would treat you with medication and you had
it was like a semi-modern witch hunt, essentially.
Absolutely. So a lot of these women were in there because their husbands were... This is one of the stories that's terrible, which I will tell, but a lot of the women were in there because the husbands got sick of them and just basically said they were insane.
Wait, hold on. Someone's like, damn, Canada's rough. You think the States were any better?
Oh, dude.
I'm going to go piss real quick.
The U.S. and Canada, in terms of the hospitals, they were the exact same.
States were worse with this shit.
So... in this side of the hospital, the forensic unit for the females. So what would happen was, because the hospital was so old, as it got older and older and older, these cells weren't designed to hold, you know, a lot of people. But as it got older, they'd stuff more people into there. Have I ever been to the CN Tower? Yeah, I've been to the top. The CN Tower, by the way, when you get up to the top of the CN Tower, you can actually see the curvature of the Earth. I know that sounds lunacy, but you can see an actual curvature to the Earth from the top of the CN Tower. I've seen it. That's why the line in Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, which is based in Toronto, the reason that he says, "I'll punch you so hard you'll see the curvature of the Earth," that line's in the movie because everybody in Canada says that as a joke because of the CN Tower. So yeah, it's flat for sure. You could see it. You could see the curvature. But anyways, these cell doors were so fucking heavy. Let's wait for Rich. He's going to come back. He's going to touch us. Touch me.
Yeah, the only reason, first off, we are still exclusive. The last show, which we forgot to name the last show at the last episode, the last show is exclusive to Twitch. It's just I'm doing the super long stream here. Wes paid for it. I'm giving Wes because I appreciate what he did. And plus, Jay's telling very interesting stories. I'm into all this shit, by the way. Like, I hope you guys are enjoying this in the chat and not boring everybody. Let me know in the chat if we're boring you, because if that's... No, if you were boring, I would tell you. Sorry, I'm just being honest with you.
So listen to this nonsense. Back in the day, remember, there was a ton of females because it was a female hospital.
Andrew, I have been.
There was a ton of male doctors and nurses, but also not police, but sort of like police. I forget what they were called, but they were sort of there to...
Were they like prison guards, essentially?
Yeah.
What the equivalent to them?
Essentially that. So what would happen was sometimes the women would go fucking batshit crazy, and they would have to get them out of the cells. But because back in the day, the cells were these giant bars, a lot of the nurses and a lot of doctors got hurt, he was telling us, because what would happen was they would barricade themselves in the cell, and eventually you'd have to go in there and get them out. There's no way to get them out. So they would say, I'm not eating, I'll shit and piss where I stand, you're going to have to come and get me. Blood everywhere, you know what I mean? It was unreal. So they have to essentially open those doors and go in and grab the person, right? The problem would be that back in the day there were old bars, so they would tie their bedding from the bed frame, which was bolted to concrete, to the bars, so you could not open the door. So he was like, the warden came up with this amazing idea. And I was like, holy shit, you were involved with this? He's like, yeah, when I first started working here, we had to essentially cut all of the bars down and we had to retrofit it. So he's like, I called it a kick plate. I'm like, what? He's like, so if there was somebody in the cell that was unruly, instead of us trying to open the door because they would tie things to it, we changed the doors and we have kick plates. And I was like, what does that even mean? He's like, so what would happen was I'd be able to have this tool or something, like something heavy, he said, like basically a hammer or steel-toed boots. And essentially on the door, they built in these kick plates that if you kick them hard enough, the whole door would just fall right into the hallway. It would just fall. So the patients could not hold the door shut because it was so heavy. They would just fall with it. And I was like, holy shit, are you serious? He's like, yeah, we would kick this thing and this whole fucking metal thing would fall on the floor into the hallway. And he's like, 9 times out of 10, the patients would be attached to the door because they were trying to fucking hold it. He's like, so all of a sudden the door slammed on the floor, and right after it, there'd be somebody on the floor next to it, and that would be the patient. And we were like, what the fuck? This is like
hold that thought, because this is an interesting super chat. California used to be the world leader of forced sterilization and eugenics. The Nazis were influenced by it. I'm not saying you're lying, but if that's true, that's fucking insane.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Well, the IBM used to send out the machines that help tag the Jews. So when they would go to gas chambers and stuff like that, they would have the IDs. IBM created that system for the Nazis, a U.S. company. Isn't that wonderful?
Yeah, and a lot of the Nazis came to the U.S. and created a lot of the technology that we use today. But we won't talk about that because society is such a great place. So there's these. So if you know Canadians or Canadian history, which I'm sure a lot of you don't, but in Canadian history, we've had serial killers in Canada, but not many. Not people as much as the States. Like in terms of,
we're number one with that too.
Yeah, in terms of the kill count, like
fucking Ted Bundy.
Yeah, so the most famous one we had was a farm called the Picton Farm, right? Actually, somebody just said in the chat. But in Picton, Canada here, there was a man who collected hookers and fed them to his pigs on his farm. And he did it to not like 20 people, probably hundreds of hookers.
Holy shit. That's like the guy who used to work at a high school by me. I'm going to go up in a little bit, but Arlington High School. He was a janitor there, and he lived, I forgot the guy's name, but he lived with his parents, and he used to get hookers in Poughkeepsie, New York, kill them, and then he put him like in suitcases in his parents' house in the attic.
Yeah.
And because the parents were disgusting hoarders, no one ever thought twice about it. And when they finally found it, they found folded up hookers' bodies from this guy who lived locally to me. It's insane.
Yeah.
Anyway, I know that's a random story, but that just reminded me of it. But continue.
Yeah, but I mean, what's insane is there's women that escaped this Picton farm. Like, he would essentially take hookers there and do things to them and then cut them up, feed them to the pigs. The only reason they caught him is because he keeps souvenirs from each one of them. So the reason I bring that up is because in 19 I don't know the exact year, 1990s, there was a famous couple in Canada called Paul Bernardo and his girlfriend. I totally forget her name. Somebody in the chat probably knows it.
Pause 1 second because people were asking this. The killer from Poughkeepsie was Kendall Francois. He was the one who would get. There's the Poughkeepsie tapes based around him, I believe.
Oh yeah, that's fucking terrible, dude. Is that the killer who recorded the VHS tapes? Carlo Mocha. Carlo Mocha. So it was Carlo Mocha's a girl. So Carlo Mocha. So let me explain this story. So what else happened in this hospital was that it was essentially Silence of the Lambs, where they would have serial killers in the hospital and they would transport them to this hospital to be studied by doctors. And Carlo Mocha went through the St.Thomas Psychiatric Hospital. She was there. I got to go see... I didn't know this at the time, but I was on her wing. I got to go see her cell, all of that stuff. I don't know how long she stayed there, but she was brought in probably for a few months. What's crazy is there's a whole system in place. So it's like each... How can I explain this? Every serial killer goes to jail, hopefully. And while they're in jail, a lot of them get special privilege because they cooperate with authorities on being researched like guinea pigs. Not in like a physical way, it's a mental way. So literally Silence of the Lambs, like Clarice shows up and talks to you in your cell. So Carlo Mocha was in this wing. So now you guys understand, like, she's considered one of the worst serial killers, even though she only killed 2, one of the worst killers in Canada history. She was in this hospital. So, in saying that, we were standing in that area of the hospital, and he told us some stories about some of the women that were in there, which there's no reason to tell you what I heard. I'll tell you just about the women. So some of the women, did terrible things, killing their own kids and lunacy. This hospital was so dangerous at times that they would have to have like 20, he said something like 20 guards per floor, I remember him saying. And I always, it didn't make sense to me. But then when he started to say, like, why, is because this is how crazy it was. He was telling a story about the cell and how they put the kick plates in so you could just bust the door open and get into the cell immediately in case one of the people in there was trying to kill themselves or whatever. On top of it, all of these women and all these patients, they were trying to either kill themselves or kill you. So this hospital was set up like a jail, and being in that section of the hospital was also one of the weirdest experiences because so many people killed themselves in those cells, and so many people killed each other and got out and into the hallway.
You have mentally ill people. Well, again, some of them probably weren't mentally ill, but even if they weren't, it's like you're stuck here for the rest of your life, along with the fact that there probably was a good portion of people that actually even today would still be considered mentally ill. Oh yeah, it's a recipe for disaster.
Well, here's one of the stories that I can't believe. So I heard this story after the fact, so I don't know the legitimacy of it. I know based on the facts, it sounds real because I was in the hospital and I saw what they were talking about. So the only way to get this story you'd have to have been in the hospital, because it actually explains like colors of rooms. So one of the things I didn't bring up is this is lunacy. Some of the women that came in there of killing their husbands or killing their boyfriends were pregnant, and they would have their babies in the hospital, and then their babies would be essentially taken away.
Wow.
Like either they would sign the rights over for the kid to be adopted if they had no family. They would sign the rights over to their parents. They would sign the rights to sisters. If they had no family, they had no options. The baby would come out. They'd deliver it literally in the cells, from my understanding, and the baby would be gone. And that woman would recover in the hospital and go back to her cell like nothing happened.
Wow.
So, the reason I tell that part is because I got to go into the nursery where they would keep the babies. And remember, this was a woman's hospital from like the 60s to something like 80-something. And it wasn't like one baby. Tons of people came through there pregnant and lost their babies, or they don't know where their babies went, and they died in the hospital and killed themselves. So much torment happened in this hospital. So the next part I want to talk about is the nursery. Going in that nursery, knowing the fact that like these babies were in there that never saw their parents again, essentially, or their mothers. It was, I've never had kids, so I can relate to people that have kids. Rich probably can feel this more than I can, but anybody that's ever had a child, having a child is like the best thing you can do in life to a lot of people I've talked, especially if you're
absolutely 100%.
Having your child, watching your child grow up. When I was in that room, listen, part of these stories I always tell, I'm not saying I'm psychic. I'm not saying that even exists or even paranormal stuff exists. But I'm saying like you feel emotions when you're in those rooms, and you feel certain aspects of life that you don't feel anywhere else, because maybe it's the emotions in the room, how heavy it is, the artwork on the walls. Dude, I saw artwork on the walls, like crayons, like 2-year-olds drew them. And what I found out later was that the nurses would draw on the walls, like with old crayons for the babies. So they draw like a bear or whatever. I got to go in there and see those drawings, and it was terrifying because there's like rows and rows, not just like 2, like 20 cribs. And you look on the wall, and it's like all this old artwork from literally I guess it would be 1923. And it's like nurse drawings, dude. And it felt like I was in Fallout, like the Fallout series. It was so weird. And it's all Art Deco, I should point out.
Sounds like something you see in a Fear game, too, literally. But continue.
Yeah, somebody just said in the chat, stop making fun of kids' art, Jay. That's funny. So coming out of that room was emotion. Like, in terms of emotions, that's where I felt the saddest. I just felt like such a loss of life because of, like, he was telling us stories of, like, what some of the parents did. Like, there's one woman, I'll tell this story, and it's terrible, so I'm trigger warning. A woman was pregnant. She already had a child that was 2 years old. She gave birth at home to the second baby. She decided that nobody should live. She killed her husband in his sleep. She killed the first baby, which was 2 years old, and then she killed the freshborn baby the day after it was born. She ended up in the hospital there. Lunacy. So that's the type of people that were in this place. Moving on from this sort of like dread, let me tell this quick story. So if you think about a hospital that has to also be a city, remember, there's 2,000 people living in this place. So this means that you got to think about logistics. How many toilets are in there? How big is the fucking sewer system? Imagine 2,000 people pissing and shitting all day. It's got to be massive. So I told the story about the tank already. I was about 4 stories below the hospital. I got to open a door to a 2 million liter tank of water. He said to us, do you want to go into the sewer system? And I said, nope. So I got to sort of see it. And it is essentially a giant fucking tank where they would store piss and shit. And get this.
Oh, God.
This is a real story. So this hospital is so giant that every day around 6 in the morning, he called it flushing. They would flush the main sewer system, and it would connect to a secondary sewer system that connected to the fucking town next door. Their whole sewer system. And at 6 in the morning, they'd hit a switch, giant doors would open up, and they'd empty up this tank. Piss and shit. And the pressure, listen to this, the pressure was so massive because of how big this tank was that if you lived in the city at 6 in the morning and you turned on your tap, you would actually watch the water pressure drop because that's how much water was, or how much sewage and shit was going into the systems. So you'd watch your toilets shake at 6 in the morning because of the pipes. That's how far back the pressure was. It'd go miles throughout the city. Because you got to keep in mind, this is in the infancy of fucking toilets. So sewer systems are like
archaic. Yeah,
archaic. They're just like clay holes in the ground, essentially. He was saying, and pipes that go for miles and stuff. And he's like,
funny man, because the Romans had that shit down lock, rudimentary back in the when the Roman Empire was around. They figured out sewer systems. It was amazing. But continue.
So here's where the story is like crazy. So you got to keep in mind, it's like you got 2,000 people there. You've got to feed them. You got to make sure that they can shit legitimately. You got to make sure that they can get exercise. So one of the exercise rooms is called the Blue Room, and it's not where you get blown. It's painted baby blue, and the reason for that is because if you're into anything that has to do with the human mind, you would know that the color blue is the softest color to look at, and it brings back memories from being a child, so it really calms people down, opposed to the color red, which makes your eyes focus on it immediately. So it's sort of, I hate to use the word triggering, but red, there's a reason why stop signs are fucking red. You get my point. There's a stop and green is go. There's a reason for that. It's not just because they chose it. It's because the human brain sees red as a cautionary color. The color blue is seen as a warm, gentle color. So listen, paint my ass, says J-Ram. I'll come down there and spray paint your tongue. You can lick my ass red. So, so listen. So this room is fucking painted baby blue. And we go into it. It's the size of, like high school gyms. It's the size of about 4 of them. And I realized that this room is a safe room, as he's calling it. So basically what it means is that all these patients that are actually good in the hospital, that aren't trying to kill you and all this stuff, they would get day passes. And around Christmas time, they would turn these blue rooms into giant Christmas halls and, turkey dinners and all this stuff. And it was like one nice side of the hospital I got to experience. So it's like one flew over the cuckoo's nest. You have all these like lunatics sitting in a room, and it's massive. However, I have never, and yeah, of course it's going to sound like, people always tell stories and try to amplify them by saying, like, I've never experienced anything like this. But I'm dead serious when I say this. I have never in my whole life, because I got panic disorder and anxiety, I have never in my life been in a room and felt that calm. I have no idea how to explain it, but it's the most peace I've ever felt in myself. And it's like an emotion, a vibration. You go into this room, and he explained what it was, and you instantly feel relaxed. I don't know what it is. It's just me maybe just interpreting the whole story as he told it, or the room. But it had like an emotion to it. And it was amazing because he'd say, oh, we used to have amazing Christmas dinners. They bring turkeys in and fucking slaughter like 80 of them, and we'd make huge meals for, 100 people at once. We'd cycle through them the whole day. So you got to keep in mind trying to feed 2,000 people. So like you get 15 minutes in there max, he said. So they bring them all into this room, about 100 of them. They'd have like 50 guards. They'd all eat together and have a great time for Christmas. It'd be snowing outside. He's like, it was a vacation for them. They would some of these patients would look forward to Christmas every year because that's all they had. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. They didn't get to go outside. By the way, I should say that nobody got to go outside except in between the wings, they'd have giant fences where you could go in between the wings into the grass. That's also fucking creepy because it still has all of the old chairs and benches there, but they're all decayed, like all wood. They're all like molded away and decayed, but they're still there.
What that looks like, yeah.
Oh yeah, dude, it's like right out of Fallout, like rusted and moldy and decayed and like falling apart. All these benches outside are like that, and you realize like all these fucking sometimes they'd like killers out there and like all these murderers and killers and rapists and all of this stuff. They'd all sit out there and just like watch the trees. And then I realized that all of the trees that are planted on the yard weren't there for them back in the day because they weren't allowed to have trees. Because let me get to this story. Because
I know where you're gonna go.
Yeah,
Continue,
because when this hospital was in play, this meant that you couldn't have buildings within the area. You couldn't have any trees that would block any line of sight because if there was a lockdown at the hospital, they'd put snipers on the roofs. And if you can't see the people, you can't shoot them. So,
I thought, well, part of the reason I should say I thought it was because people would try to hang themselves in there.
Well, no, let me get to that really quick. Because the whole place is full of people that want to die, every single room we went into, there would be no physical way to, after a certain date, I should say, because they switched it in the 60s, I believe, or the 50s, he said, because a lot of people were killing themselves with bed sheets. So they actually tied the bed. There was like a zipper system or something he was explaining that you could not get your bed sheet off, and you couldn't cut it, so you couldn't use that as a noose anymore. So essentially, there was no way in the hospital, to kill yourself, which is another logistic nightmare you have to think about when you run a hospital with 1,300 patients, right? You don't think about those things when you're on the outside, but when you're in the inside, these people want to literally.
You have like 80% of them that want to commit suicide. It can't really. It has to be out of control.
It has to be out of control. So what's incredible is like they had to go back and retrofit the whole hospital for that instance. So in the hallways, they used to have back in the day, remember, they didn't have air conditioning, dude. They had fucking holes on top of the doors in the hallways, and those doors were used to vent air in and out of the room. So they'd open the windows in the room itself, and then they'd open that thing above the door, and it would blow it down the hallway. Now, here's where I'm going to go into the paranormal stuff, and then I'm going to shut up about the hospital, because I'm sure a lot of people are waiting for this. Do I believe in ghosts? I don't know. Do I believe in some of interesting things that have happened to me and I can't explain them? Absolutely. Did I experience anything like that in the hospital? Definitely. So, of course, the reason I went into the hospital the whole reason I went into the hospital, I should point out, is because I was like, I think there's probably ghosts in here. You know, that's what everybody would assume going into a place like this. Thousands of people have died here. Terrible things have happened. I mean, there's no place like this on Earth. These hospitals from the 1900s are terrible places. Terrible things have happened here. So
they were around like not that one specifically.
1990s.
Yeah.
Yeah, they finally shut a lot of them down. Dude, if you think this place is bad, there's a place in the States where they kept handicapped children. And that place is still existing. That place makes this hospital look like fucking daycare. Like it was, I could tell stories about that one because I love these. Well, I don't love the stories, but I love researching it because I live near one. However, here we go. Paranormal stories. Then I'll shut up finally about this. So there's about 6 paranormal stories. And he told us about 6 different stories. So I already told the story about the woman in the basement who worked in the hospital, died from cancer. Probably from the asbestos in the fucking basement. I'll tell it quickly in case you didn't hear it last time. There was a woman who worked in the hospital as quote-unquote a nurse. However, she wanted to be a handyman. They accepted her as a handyman. She would walk into the hospital as a nurse, go into the basement, and literally put on janitor gear. And she was a handyman in the basement. That's what she wanted to do. That was her passion. The handyman loved her, and they let her stay down there. So she was secretly a handyman. She died of cancer, but she lived her. Yeah, she lived her life. Dude, wait until you hear this. She lived her life in the hospital, essentially. She had nobody else. She just worked, went home, came back to the hospital. That was her life. I think her name was Carol. She died 6 hours after a shift. She had cancer and kept working. That's how much she wanted to stay there. The story about her was her name tag would continuously move around the building in the basement. So essentially, the guy that showed us the tour brought us into the room where her fucking name tag was, her personal sink, her personal locker. I got to touch the locker, open the locker. I held her name tag as he told me the story. I looked at it. It was legitimate. It was from like the fucking 1960s, 70s. The story of her goes, her ghost, quote unquote, goes, every single time he comes into the hospital to do a walkthrough, he makes sure to go into that room and talk to her because he said that she's still there. And I said, well, what is the experience? And he said, you're holding it. And I realized I'm holding the fucking evidence. He said, put that down on the sink here. So I did. And he goes, next time I come in here, I can almost guarantee you that her name tag will be back in her fucking jacket pocket. And he goes, I swear on my children, my grandchildren, my children, my wife, that I do not fucking move it. That every time I move it, she puts it back into her jacket pocket like she's still working here. And I was like, okay, time to leave this area. See ya. Because as soon as he said that, I got this feeling like, yeah, someone is watching us right now. You know that feeling you get going upstairs in the basement or going into a basement. You feel like someone's watching you and something's behind you. I got chills down my back. I remember to this day saying, let's just get out of here because I don't like it. So that was story number one that scared the shit out of me. Story number two, another janitor that worked with him back in 1970 died from cancer again. I wonder why, but that's just...
What a coincidence.
Asbestos. So another janitor died. His name was Buddy. They called him Buddy. He also lived in the hospital. In 1994, a psychic went through the building. There's only been 2 psychics that have actually been allowed into the building. I don't know about anyone else sneaking in, but they've had 2 psychics. So I don't know if you believe in it or not. I kind of do, I kind of don't. But in 1994, there was a psychic who actually got into the building and did a TV show. Now, I will try to find this and put it on Twitter. He did a show in the building, and he did a psychic reading. In that fucking episode, he talks about feeling somebody who keeps walking by him in the hallways, and he goes, I keep feeling like something's rolling by me or something's walking by me. So the guy I'm standing with in the present day, he goes, when I saw that interview in 1994, like, you know, he's like, obviously I was standing there while the camera crew was there. He goes, what they don't show in that episode is that as he's talking about the guy, he's like, somebody keeps walking by me. And he's like, I hear the psychic saying, I hear wheels or something weird, like wheels. And I hear laughing. And somebody keeps saying, hey, buddy. Hey, buddy. And then he goes, I keep hearing laughter. And he goes, as the psychic was saying this, he goes, I had to tell them that they're talking about my friend who died, named Buddy, used to fucking, his job was to mop the entrance of the hospital. And what you're hearing, what the psychic keeps hearing, is the wheels of the fucking mop bucket.
That's crazy.
And he goes, the reason you're hearing laughter is because Buddy was a bit of a lunatic, and he would just point and laugh at people and make them laugh. Like, he'd pretend he was insane because they would make fun of the patients, but he would like laugh and be like joking around with the mop in front of the other janitors. So I was like, holy shit, you serious? This is like the actual Buddy is standing here? He goes, so yeah. He goes, every time I come down the hallway now, I go, hey, Buddy. And he goes, every once in a while, I swear to God on my wife's fucking soul, he goes, I hear a mop bucket moving in a hallway. And he goes, I know. I just pretend it's Buddy now. He goes, it's just Buddy.
Bucky.
So that was story number 2. Story number 3. this one involves me to a certain degree because it's my own theory. That janitor who walked us around this place, he told us, I should probably tell this story last, but I'll tell it now quickly. He fucking tells us this story about this woman who went missing in 1984. And that same episode with the psychic, that psychic said that he sensed a soul hovering around this area near a window. But they never put two and two together because back in the day, that fucking area that he was looking out at was a pool. They used to have a pool for the nurses. So back in the 1950s, they built a pool. It was just outside the main entrance on the back side of the building. And in 1984, they buried it with cement. It's still there. You can actually stand in the pool, but it's filled with cement. I stood on it. The psychic said that something was there. Something had happened there. So back in 1984, they brought scent dogs in, and the dogs kept sniffing around those areas, but they couldn't determine what was going on. The psychic said something was there. As he's telling the story about this, let me back up quickly here. He wasn't telling the same story at the same time during the tour. He mentioned the fucking thing as we walked by it the first time, saying, oh, a woman went missing. And I always thought, why did he tell us at that portion? Like, I got this weird feeling, man. And I'll explain it. So at the end of the tour, we got back to the pool area, and he told the story again. Oh, in 1984, a blonde, blue-eyed, 18-year-old woman escaped from here, and they never found her body. Or they never found her. She got out of here. So I'm like, oh, that's fucking weird. Because I go, I've watched that psychic talk about this area. This is the spot, right? And he goes, yeah. He goes, that pool, that's the pool. That used to be the pool. So I sit back, and I'm with my roommate. You guys know roommate.
Yes.
And I swear to God, in this moment, for some reason, I start to think in my head, I don't know why, I'm looking at this guy telling the story, and I'm looking at my roommate. We'll call him roommate from now on. I'm looking at roommate, I'm looking at the guy. And he's telling us this girl went missing. The same year they filled the pool in. And I look back at the guy. I should have told this last. Maybe this will be the last story. And he's got this, like, you know, human nature. You can really look at somebody and you can just see a moment of glee just in the corner of his lip as he's telling the fact that this woman in 1984, while he worked at the fucking hospital, went missing and that the pool was filled in with concrete. So do the math on that one. I'm standing here looking at roommate, looking at this guy who gave the tour. He's probably in his 70s. And he's fucking telling us with this little bit of glee in the corner of his lip. And I see it. And I got chills down my spine. And I look over at roommate. And roommate's already looking at me. Because we both saw what we saw. And there's no doubt. I'm getting chills because I'm standing in that moment still. And I'm not making this up to be like, oh, he did it. This is what fucking happened. This guy took us through this whole place. By the way, I should also point out, as we were going through this place, every once in a while he'd tell a fake story. Like he'd just do this little fake thing where he'd go, oh, a woman died right there. Ha 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 ha. And he'd go, no, I'm kidding. And we didn't know why he was doing it, like trying to freak us out.
That's a knee slapper, you fucking weirdo.
Yeah. So as we got to the staircase, he's pointing out the window. Oh, this woman. Dude, I swear to God, it is literally out of a fucking David Fincher horror movie because
Love David Fincher shit.
Yeah, listen to this, man. You know, I've studied this stuff because I want to make horror movies. So I'm trying to get the nuance into my films. So I've studied serial killers and what they do and their motives and all of that shit over the last 10 years. I love that stuff. And one of the main things that a lot of these killers do is get to relive that moment by telling somebody that doesn't know about it that they did it. Now, there's lots of famous stories about killers who have admitted to their sisters or their mothers that they killed somebody, and the mothers are like, ha, yeah, sure you did. Yeah, right. And then all of a sudden a body gets dug up, and it was that. It's a true story. Like there's a very, like if you watch Netflix documentaries, that's in all of them almost. All the time the serial killer's like, oh, I told people and they didn't believe me. I'm telling you.
Because they get off on the fact
Yeah,
that
they get to relive it, right?
Thing.
Yeah,
And
because
it's a control thing.
Yeah, some serial killers take what they call trophies. It's what the FBI uses as a term. It's called a trophy. So they'll take a shoe, like the guy in Picton who fed the girls to the pigs. He would take some of their clothes or their shoes or their wallets, and those were his trophies. The reason that serial killers take trophies is so they can relive that moment again and get that rush. So, I swear to fucking God that this guy tells these stories and gets to relive the rush. Like the motive fits. Like in my opinion,
it's like Jeffrey Dahmer, how he would try to turn people into zombies, but after that he would keep parts of them, keep their remains. So a lot of times they do that so they could relive because they get off on it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll never forget looking at this guy, and the way he smirked, like he got away with it. Like it's unbelievable. So, I'll get roommate to tell me. Roommate looked over. I looked at him, and it was just a moment of somehow our intuition both talked to each other, and we knew exactly what we were thinking about. So, and that was the end of the tour, because I got the fuck out of there. After he did that, we were right at close to the front door. As soon as he did that and gave this little moment happened, we left. And it wasn't just because the tour was over. I was leaving regardless because I had enough of this. Now, finally, the last paranormal story I'll tell is about the bed sheets. So, in every single room of this hospital, they'd have these fucking giant bed sheets, and some of them, remember, because of tuberculosis, because of, I forget what he's telling us, different viruses and all, blah, blah, blah. They'd have these bed sheets that were essentially see-through-ish, kind of, like you can kind of make out through them what you're looking at, but you can't, right? Because they're actually plastic, so you can't, spit through them. Because you got to keep in mind that some of these women would, have tuberculosis and all of this stuff, but they'd be tied up on the bed, essentially strapped to the bed because they're fucking in a hospital, but they're also in a jail. So, the bed sheets back in the day would be these special heavy sheets where you could, if you were inside of it, you could spit, and the spit wouldn't come through. So doctors could talk to a patient but not get blood on them, because again, women would toss blood. I know that sounds terrible, but they would do it all the time, he said. Or they would spit blood at them, to projectile it in people's faces.
Mm-hmm. Well, so that's what they in prisons. A lot of times what they'll do to the prison guards is they make the prisoners will make a shit piss.
Yeah. And they wear those,
and they'll throw it through the little thing. They'll try to hit him with it to get it.
Oh yeah. He told us stories about that. There would be a bucket, and some women would try to piss in it, and they would store piss in it for a month. They'd hide it in. So let me just say this. They would also pay off, because keep in mind that this place was so big that it was a city. It had to have money involved in it. So back in the day, instead of having credits like they do in jail now, you know how you can donate to somebody in jail and they'll get credits towards food? They don't actually get the money. Back in the day, they actually had a fucking... It's called gassing. Yeah.
Gassing, you're right, yeah. They make a shit and piss and bodily fluid bomb to attack the prison guards with, yeah.
Terrible. So, back in the day, they actually had a bank in the hospital. I got to go into the bank. It was about the size of my church here, a little section of this up here. It had a vault in it. It had an actual teller, a bank manager, and the patients, this is a real story, would have to go to the bank to get money to pay for things that they wanted, like snacks and clothes, while they were in the hospital. Some of them, obviously. So there's an actual bank in the hospital, a legitimate branch of a bank where people could come put money into accounts, people could take money out. The reason I'm telling that is because the patients would bribe guards in this place. He said it was a massive issue because back in the day they didn't have video cameras, so it'd be easy to pass somebody a fucking $5 bill. And in 1960, $5 bill or $20 bill would be worth a lot of money. So you would have patients paying the guards to get special privileges and let them out or let them do things or go in closets or I mean, you can imagine what I mean by go in closets. So, oh, the stream died. Oh, it's back. Are we good?
Stream didn't die on my end, and we're live right now.
Okay, so here's the story. This is the paranormal story. So there would be an ER, emergency room in this hospital. And what would happen in there is essentially if somebody got stabbed or somebody got, murdered or whatever, or was about to die, choking, whatever it may be, they'd be put on a stretcher, taken through the tunnels, boom, to the ER, emergency room. There'd be doctors there ready to perform anything they need to do. So say your appendix burst, boom, you'd be in a hospital, you'd be taken care of, you'd be in that side of the hospital being taken care of. Here's what's freaky. In every one of the rooms in the hospital, they'd have these special sheets. And then in some of the rooms, they'd have regular sheets. Now, the special sheets were like plastic. You couldn't spit through them. Those were heavy, so you couldn't do jack shit to move them if you were a patient. You would just sit in bed and you'd look through them. However, if you were a patient that sort of had special privileges because you were on good merit, you'd have rooms where you'd go to recover, and those rooms had sheets that were basically like fucking super thin, and you could like blow on them and they would go like this. He would have to go on a 6-hour tour around the hospital to make sure that everything in the hospital was still, the present day was still good. Everything was great. Nothing is behind me except my cat.
Yeah, and I was standing up because I've been sitting down for a long time. You're not supposed to do that. That's why everyone's like, what the fuck are you doing? I'm about to whip out my dick and yodel.
He's possessed, man, the story. So here's the final...
My penis is possessed with urine. I'll be right back.
Yeah. So, yeah, go. I'll wait until he gets back to tell the final story. While he's gone, I'll tell a side story. While we were in the hospital, we were standing there, and a lot of people try to break into the hospital, so there's a lot of noises at nighttime. That's why he goes there at nighttime to do his tour of the hospital. It takes him about 6 hours to walk through every single room. He's got to walk through every single room because it's a very dangerous place. Like I said before, people have broken in. If you look up St. Thomas Psychiatric Hospital on YouTube, you can watch a walkthrough. I highly suggest to do that. I'll put it in the chat again. Look that up, St. Thomas Psychiatric Hospital. Look it up on YouTube after this stream, and you can watch walkthrough of the hospital, and you'll see how fucking freaky it is. So, I think Rich has a couple of hours left. So, basically, we're standing there. How much? Oh, somebody asked in the chat. Let me get to this. Spooky Noob says, "How much to stay there all night?" I honestly, if I got to sleep over there, I would do it. I would honestly just sleep in the hospital for free.
My ass is sore like Jay fucked it. No, we're going till I'm going till Jay. I know I don't want him to be exhausted. I'm going till 2.
So. Here's the final thing. So, the short story was we're standing there and we heard sounds, and he's like, we kept hearing sounds like somebody was like opening and closing a door, and he goes to us, oh no, that's just the vents. And we're like, oh, the vents. And he's like, yeah, everybody that comes in here always thinks it sounds like footsteps. He goes, we installed these vents that open and close to send air around the hospital in different stories. In different sections. That's the vents. So that's my little side story that scared the shit out of us. So here we go. Last story. Takes him 6...
That's what Jay should name a podcast with his horror stories. The last story.
I know.
Last show, and then the last story. I
We'll
don't
do
care. Dude, if I thought you were fucking, like, murdering the stream, I would tell you. So
yeah, I know. I don't think I have. I think you guys enjoy this. So.
No, it's 1 a.m. Obviously, and we're still over 700 people, which is insane for me.
Oh, I love you guys. You guys are sexy. I hope you love the stories, because I actually have more stories about another place that I went into, which I'll share next time. There's an old huge hospital in Barrie, Ontario I used to live into. We got into there and we saw some shit I wish we didn't see there. Like blood shit. But anyways, not well, it could have been blood, but it looked like blood or like old blood, rust. So remember, this guy's going to walk around this place. Takes him 6 hours. He's got to go into every single fucking room. Imagine that, Rich. Walking into this place alone, 2 a.m. You got to check every single room in the hospital. It takes him 6 hours. So that's his job, right? He's used to it. He's done it for years. So he's walking one night. And there's still... Ah, man, I think I could do this for you guys. I think I have photos of it, but those sheets that are still hanging over some of the beds where the beds used to be, by the way, all the beds are gone from the hospital. I should also point out the hospital had a ton of copper in it, and a lot of people tried to break in for the copper. That's why the hospital is shut down too, because all these idiots trying to get copper would get a face full of fucking asbestos trying to break the walls open to get the copper out. So...
Human beings are amazing.
So they're so dumb. He showed us an area where people broke in, and I said, "Well, what? How expensive is copper?" Like, he goes, "Dude," he goes, "This section over here, somebody cleaned it out on a weekend." He's like, "We didn't know about it. Got all the copper out." I was like, "How much is it worth?" He's like, "Probably $1 million." I couldn't.
Holy shit!
Yeah,
well, they'll be dead from lung cancer. But...
Yeah, he goes. They must have full. He's like, they probably full, like, trucks. I was like, okay, that's fucking insane. But anyways, so he's walking around the hospital. He's got his wife there. He's also got 2 guests with him who are also walking around getting the tour, right? The same tour he's giving us. I told this story last time, but I'll give it more detail here. So as they're walking around, they're a bit older. I think he said he was in his 60s 10 years ago. His wife's same age. So they're all 60, 2 guys, 2 girls, walking around this hospital. It's like 2 a.m. He's doing his rounds. They walk by one of the rooms, and the sheet that normally just sits flat down to the ground, he's looking into the room, and there's 2 other girls there, and they're talking over here, looking into the room. And all of a sudden, the sheet... It looks like somebody picked up the sheet, walked under the sheet, held it up as they walked under it, and dropped it. So he watches it happen, but the 2 girls, the 2 women that are there, I should say, don't see this happen. So he's like looking at a room, watches it happen. He turns, and he says as he turns, the 2 women are standing there looking in down the hallway. And between both of their ears, he said they're standing like this, next to each other. Between both of their ears, they said they felt something with wind push their hair and go in between their ears and said, "Get the fuck out." Like,
holy shit.
Something whispered in their ears, "Get the fuck out." So that scared the shit out of them. And this is the same moment that he basically saw the sheet move. So... they got the fuck out of there. He basically was like, "Okay, you guys go back to the lobby. Let's get the fuck out of here." And obviously to this day, his wife will never go in the hospital again. And he said that she never has. And she also hired a priest in the 80s to bless him or something because she thought that the ghosts would come home with him, which, in paranormal lore, that's a possibility, but so, I could also tell the story about the young boy who died next to the furnace buried alive in coals, which I already told that, so we don't need to go into that. That's a terrible story. One of the fucking doors on one of the furnaces broke open and buried a 7-year-old or 14 to 7-year-old kid alive.
Holy shit.
Like, so get this. It's, the furnace is literally 3 stories tall. And it's the size of a city bus. And it's got sections in it where there's like fire and coal and it goes all the way up to the ceiling. So it's like buried 3. I stood next to it. It's the weirdest thing ever you've ever seen in your life. 1903 it was built.
Yeah, 1903 heating tech, yeah.
I'm looking up at it, and I'm like, holy fuck. He's like, do you see, like, a 2 floors up, he's like, you see that metal plate? He's like, it broke open, and coal, like a whole story full of coal, landed on the child, who was basically shoveling around the bottom, cleaning it. And it buried him alive with burning coal.
Oh my God.
And get this, they could not get to him in time because it was fucking burning coal. Like, he was dead instantly from the pressure of how heavy it was, but
And
also
getting cooked alive. Yeah.
No, but no, I'm getting to the point of this. They could not get to him, if you know what I mean. Like, they could not get his body out. So his body essentially got cooked alive until the fire department eventually got there. And they pulled out, essentially, his skeleton was left. Like that's like a part of his heart was left, because the heart is the strongest muscle in the body. It's the hardest muscle to sort of disintegrate in an incinerator. Don't ask me why I know that, but basically a part of his skull and a part of his heart was left. He was buried alive under coal. He got cremated alive, essentially.
What a way to go.
Like, I can't even imagine. Well, luckily they said he died instantly because of the weight. So I was like, thank fucking God. But his body sat there and got cremated alive. So they found his heart. They found part of his heart. And that's in a newspaper from town. That's a real fucking story. And I stood next to one of these, and I stood where it happened. He's like, because there was originally 6 of these things standing up. 6 fucking city buses on. That's how much heat they had to generate to blow throughout the building for the hot water and the heating in the winter, right? 6 of them. Get this, man. In 1992, they cut the roof off of the sanitarium, and they took military. These things are so valuable that they sold 3 of them. The city actually sold 3 of the boilers, and they had to cut the roof off and get a military helicopter to lift it out of there. Like, it's insanity, but it happened.
Why are they so valuable? They're antiquated furnaces.
No, they're not, because I don't know. I'm not going to speak on what I don't know about in these stories, but from my understanding, they could still be used to this day.
Because hold on. Someone is Poe died instantly but cremated alive because he died from the weight of the coal.
Yeah.
But then was
maybe I didn't explain this enough, but these furnaces. Let me say this again. These furnaces are 3 stories tall. I'll try to get a photo of it. They're 3 stories tall. There's enough coal in there to crush a car. Like a car would be crushed if it fell on it. So one of the gates on the fucking furnace broke, and it covered him. All of the coal from one of them covered a child. Like, keep in mind, he's only like 7 to 14. He's a small little boy. So they said that it basically would have crushed him to death instantly, and then they couldn't get to him because he's on the floor covered in coals, and the heat is like extraordinary. So, yeah, I don't want to get into the full detail of that because whatever. But so they sold 3 of these goddamn furnaces. I don't know the logistics of why. He was explaining it to me, and he said that basically they're worth millions of dollars to this day because they're historic, and also they were flown out to some train place, like some train museum bought them or something, from my memory. I think he said that. You
got to send me a picture of those because those sound nuts.
Let me see if I can get this. St. Thomas Psychiatric. Dude, then you could show it on the stream. Furnace. Dude, if you guys want to check this out, there's photos of the hallways. Actually, Rich, you want to do this quickly?
What's up?
I'm going to send it to you on Facebook. That's the name of the hospital. I just sent it to you.
Mm-hmm.
Dude, search that on Google and show them the Google images. And you guys can see the hospital I've been talking about.
Doing it right now, and I'll switch in St. Thomas Psychiatric Hospital. All right, yeah, we could go through do this crazy images. Hold on. Let me.
Yeah, and then I'll get out of here, out of your hair in a second. Yeah, like
Listen.
just start going through them. Like click the top one, and I'll just explain what you're seeing, everybody. So that's the main entrance. If you watch the movie Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, that was featured at the beginning of the movie. That is essentially the main entrance. Right above the main door there is where the warden or the director, that's his offices. So to
looks like a fucking high school from this one picture. It's kind of strange.
Yeah, like scroll through them and you'll see. So that's the main door. That again is the main door. That's them filming. That right there.
Go.
That right there is one of the main hallways, I believe. That is one of the main hallways. No, you know what? That's the hallway. So at the end of the hallway that you guys see there, that's the room that we just saw above the hospital there, that window. Down there, that's one of the rooms there. It might not be facing the same direction, but that's one of the rooms. Next photo is one of the wings. So the wing you're looking at right now is one of the wings that is shut down. That's why there is also that wasn't originally there. If you look at the bars on the windows, that photo must be quite recent because those weren't always there. The reason that those are there now is because of the asbestos. People were breaking the windows and causing damage, which is fucking dangerous for the people that work in the buildings. Next photo. That wing right there, if you look at the top left, that wing is the condemned wing. That's the wing that is officially shut down that nobody can go into. The reason for that is they had a flood, caused all the asbestos to go into the air, and they lost the whole goddamn wing.
Oh, shit. Holy shit.
Yeah, so that's another photo from the same area. Try to find an aerial photo so you can show them that.
This is fucking crazy. Like, that shit always amazes me.
So I'm glad we should have had the photos up while I told the stories. Goddamn dummy I am. If you could find an aerial photo, like that right there is another. Yeah, that one. Can you zoom that one in?
Yeah. Well, let me save the image, and then I can.
Now, keep in mind, I actually have drone footage of this. All right. So, Rich, do me a favor and point at the front of the building where that oval is. To the right a little bit more. Across the street, that building right adjacent across. Keep going there. Where Rich has the handprint, zoom in a little bit more.
Yeah, I will. I don't know why. I thought it was going to zoom in more, but okay.
No, that's okay. Enhance. Computer enhance this. Thank you.
Yeah, like we're NCIS.
Computer enhance. So I'm going to point out a few cool things you guys can see here. Across the street where he initially pointed, that's where the nurses lived. Because they didn't live in the hospital. So the front door is where Rich was pointing there. That's the front door you guys seen in the photo. That's how fucking big this place is. That front door is 3 stories tall. It's like every one of those things is an apartment building. So the nurses stayed across the street, and there's an actual tunnel that goes underneath that walkway. You see that walkway that goes from one building to the other? That is the tunnel system. So anywhere you see a road here, there's a tunnel. Now, Rich, if you can point to the building on the far left. Yes, here? That building. If you look to the left of that building, guys, there's a little walkway. That walkway is also...
The place is fucking huge, man. I know you said it before, but to see the scope in a picture...
Oh, it's fucking insane. So this photo...
Have a good night, Mr. Oliveria. Sorry, I just want to say...
Yeah, I love him. Go to bed. Go in my bed. So that, where he's pointing now, that walkway there, that's also a tunnel, and that tunnel goes over to the furnace system. You can't see the furnace system in these photos because it's massive, and it's at the left side of the photo. So, Rich, if you point at the center column where it sort of meets like a T from the front door to the back there.
Right here?
Yeah. The If you go to the right, keep going to the right, stop there. And that junction right there, that T marker right below where the hand is, that's where the fucking pool used to be. That's where we had that encounter and we said, we're getting the fuck out of here. Now, if you look closely in this photo, you'll notice that there's cars here. So this must have been taken in like the 80s because...
Yeah, it's piled with cars right here.
Yeah, because this would have been open. Now this place has giant trees that are covering the whole... basically covering the whole land around it.
Now, what are these buildings that I'm...
So
these patients, like there where they slept or...
Yeah, those are the wings. So that's where the cells were, right? So the front of the building is essentially where... Now, I didn't even mention this, but the front of the building is also where, like, just normal public would also come and see doctors. Like, that front wing. So that front little wing, like, point to the front of the building again.
Yeah, hold on one second, too. Chris, if you're bored, dude, guess what you can do?
Why?
Stop watching. He's been, like, on and off low-key complaining for, like, a half a fucking hour. Seriously?
Well, I love him.
I love him, too. Here's a kiss for you. Dude, relax and go get some sleep. Anyway, continue.
Yeah, so right where his hand is, that's the front door we entered in. Right below there, that tunnel that goes along the road, down across the road to the building across. That
this
again,
right here?
No, that right there is gone. That building
What the fuck was that?
I have no idea what that is. It doesn't exist anymore. I'm guessing that was the security building because they had to have security there. So legitimately, that's probably where the guards stayed, to be honest, because that building is gone now. I don't know what happened to it. They tore it down. Actually, Rich, if you go to the left more to that sort of squiggly road, that's where they built the new hospital. Right there, yeah. That road's not there anymore. Right where your hand is on the marker there, that's where the new hospital is. So,
is it a psychiatric hospital?
Yeah. It's massive.
Okay.
So let me finish this whole story off tonight by saying this part. We're looking at the hospital.
Jay's been finishing for. It's fine.
Yeah,
I'm enjoying it. But you've been finishing for the past 2 hours.
Yeah, but dude,
it's fine. I'm enjoying it.
Listen. Point at the back wings while I tell this part of this. Those wings back there are 3 stories tall. I don't know how many rooms are in there. Probably
you
about...
You can actually see they're 3 stories with even the pixelated picture.
Yeah, they're amazing. They're huge fucking things. That's what we saw in the photos earlier there, right?
Pause because someone said a brilliant line. Jay's been edging for 2 hours.
Yeah, I'm about to shoot off. Let me tell you the best part of this whole story, guys. Other than the people who murdered people, who spent life in jail, when this place closed in the 80s, I'm not making this up, all of the patients in this, the 1,300 patients, out of the 1,300 patients, there's about 700 patients who were not considered to be violent or whatever you want to call it anymore. I forget the technical term. In the 80s, you're looking at the hospital. I'm not making this part up. In 1985 or 4, and this is not a fucking rumor, this is true because I could back it up with evidence. When this, rehabilitated, not really.
Chris, you're fine, but continue.
When they closed this place down, they literally opened the doors and let 700 patients out. The people that they've been keeping there for 20, 30, 40 years. When the hospital shut down, I'll say it again. In the 80s, they just opened the doors and they kicked them out of the hospital. And I'm not kidding about this. If you look at the front of the hospital, you'll see a major road there. That's called Sunset. That road's called Sunset because it goes down to a world-class beach about 14 miles to the right. To the left, though, it goes to a small town called St. Thomas. All of the patients, and I'm not making this up, left at the same time, walked down that road into the town.
Christ.
And I'm not kidding about this. To this day, I can drive just down the road here, a couple kilometers, and still see patients that are homeless that still live in the city. and I'm not making it up. They have the St. Thomas Psychiatric Hospital community center where they stay in the winter, and you can just, the same patients from the 80s are walking around the town here from the 80s. They got kicked out of the hospital.
How old are they now? Jesus
Christ.
Christ.
Ton of them are there. They're all in their 70s and 80s. And they're just elderly people walking around town. You'll see them with like wheelchairs. You'll see them with fucking strollers being pushed around by nurses. Because listen, the hospital became too much to cover, and I guess they shut it down also because of the asbestos. So every patient that was in here was moved. So obviously serial killers were not fucking let out, but over 700 patients left the hospital at the exact same time and literally had nowhere to go, and they just lived in, and this is a terrible story, because if I walk down the road from where I am right now, there's a hiking ground, and there's a fucking tent camp where they live in the summer. They still live outside, some of them, to this day.
Shit, in their 70s and 80s too.
And I could show you photos. It's literally called Tent City. Everybody in the city that lives near me knows about it. It's called Tent City, and it's where the patients live. And that is the end of the story. So I'm surrounded by essentially patients that stayed and were tortured in this hospital. But now let me add this as a total ending. No, there's only been one murder that's taken place in this city since they were released, and it had nothing to do with them. So it's terrible.
I guess they picked the right people to just kick out. But it's amazing to me they did all that to keep them contained, and then like, yeah, it's closed. Get the fuck out. Like, that's so bizarre.
It's insanity. You know, it's really crazy. In 1984, that happened in almost every major psychiatric hospital in Ontario, like Ontario, Canada. So downtown Toronto, they let out over 1,400 patients at one of them. That's why, you know what? This sounds insane, but that's why there's homeless people in a lot of these parts of the city still. They're from fucking hospitals from the 80s, and they're in their like 50s and 60s. If you see an elderly person who's absolutely insane standing in Canada, there's actually, and this sounds insane, there's actually a chance that that person was just released from a hospital and nobody took care of them anymore. They just ended up on the street. Like, can you imagine having mental health issues and they just kick you out, and you don't even know what a fucking job means. You don't even get money. You just live outside suddenly. No food, nothing.
You just exist. It's insane.
So it's insane because I see the people. And there's like downtown there's fucking buildings built for them now where they stay in the winter. Like it's crazy. So anyways, that's officially the ending, I swear to God, allegedly, of the stories of this building. Now, there are more stories, which I'm not going to keep fucking going on about, but...
I'm sure there's endless stories. Look at the size of that place and how long it was around.
Listen to what we should do. I've got drone footage. I should edit it together. I'll upload it to Google, and next time we get into Spooky Story Night, we'll play that footage of the drone, and I'll tell stories as it's flying over the fucking building. Because I actually got illegal footage of this building. Like, click some more of these images. Like, right there, dude. That right there is one of the rooms that basically all the windows got broken into. What you're seeing here is somebody broke into the hospital, and you should not be in this fucking room. This is one of the rooms...
Peeling asbestos. Look at it.
Yeah, this is one of the fucking rooms where the asbestos is in the air because it flooded, and it basically cooked the paint off the walls. That's what happens in these places. So, like, click any of the... Dude, click the video... 3 to the right, or 2 to the right. Dude, there, go back one. Sorry. That right there, guys. That's what I was talking about. That's the fucking old spot where they go out and sit in between the wings. And it looked like Fallout. That's exactly what I meant.
It looks exactly like Fallout.
Yeah, that's what I fucking meant.
It's about the same amount of color you'd see in a 360 game, too.
Yeah, go to the photo to the right one. That's scary, because that totally dude, that's... So what that is, if you go to one of the wings, you'll see... I'll show it in a second, but you notice how it's a curved window at the end? Now, yes. Rich, if you show the photo that is to the left, 1, 2, 3, 4, on the top.
Okay, to the
like
left?
Just left. No, left.
I thought you're okay. I'm sorry. I was thinking.
One more. Oh, that's a terrible photo. Fuck. Can't really.
150 by 150. That's like.
Okay, go down. Click. Go down. Go up one. Go left one. Click that one.
This one.
The one to the right.
This one.
Yeah. There you go, guys. That's just the opening of the hospital. That's how big it is. It's fucking massive.
That's insane.
Like, yeah, just randomly go through some, and then we'll get the hell out of here. Like, so you guys can. I want you guys to go to bed with a visual representation of this hospital.
Check the proper people on YouTube. More of this. Interesting. Oh, I've heard of them before.
Oh, the proper people? Dude,
Yeah.
I watch them all the time. They go into all these fucking places. Now, the problem with this hospital is for the people is it's impossible to get into some of this now because they locked it down big time. So, right there, dude. That's one of the fucking cell doors that falls right off with the push of a button. So that.
Oh, yeah. So if you need to get in there immediately, yeah.
Is that from the same place? It might. Well, that essentially is the same. That does look like the hospital, but some of these might be mixed in with like that right there.
Picture.
Yeah, that photo's shit. Dude, what you should do is go to the top of the thing and go to search options and just search for large, like, filter. Go to the filter there. You see it?
Okay. Yeah,
and then
yeah.
search for size large.
Large, like my ass.
Large or extra large, whatever. So when you click the photo, it'll become huge. Let's just do a few more photos, guys. Like,
Let's do extra large.
anything with like details. Like click that one or the one to the left, the dark ones.
Which one? These?
Yeah, those are cool. Like that right there. Those are the corridors that go between the wings, right? So basically, none of the patients were allowed in those sections. Those were just for the nurses to get around the building. The windows obviously also did not fucking open up. Now, yeah, just go through some random.
Creepy looking place.
Go through some random. Okay, right there. That's a good example. If you guys look to the left and the right side of this photo, you'll see that those are security doors. Now, if you look further down the photo, you'll see that there's even more security doors. This right here, this looks like to me like the wing where they had the electroshock therapy set up. So that door on the left there looks quite familiar, but the problem with this place is I don't know how many fucking rooms. 1,000, maybe? More than 1,000 rooms.
Lyoko, I've been to Alcatraz. The solitary confinement cells are no joke. If the door wasn't open, it would be pitch black. Yeah, why do you think? And a lot of those people, if they ever get out of prison, actually come out worse than they went in. At least in the States, anyway, because we treat prisoner well. It's supposed to be for rehabilitation, but they come out being more of a monster. Abby, that is crazy. Imagine seeing a giant metal vent blown out and my sister's breast cup. I can't. And my sister's breast mug had coffee in it, and I drank the coffee out of it, and then she was angry because it was my breast mug. No. Imagine seeing a giant metal vent blown out and a flame and coal started blown out of that vent. My sister's breast mug, I farted in it, and I drank some coffee.
Dude, show a couple more of the photos below there where it's like decaying.
Like here?
Yeah, like the darker one. Like they're right there, man. Like that wing is shut down. Like I don't know how they got the photo. You should not be in there. It's like death.
Well,
so
you have hazmat suit.
I'll tell you what happened in this wing. Essentially, in the I think in 1997, after it was shut down, one of the boilers exploded that feeds hot water in there. You could see the boiler on the bottom left of the photo. You could see the sort of output for the heat. Mm-hmm. One of those exploded from ice. It froze on the outside of the building, or a pipe froze, and it flooded boiling water, about an inch of it, across the whole floor here, and it was there for the whole weekend, and it cooked the paint off the walls, and they literally just shut the building down. They were like, we can't go in there. No one's going in there. So they shut the whole wing down. So somebody broke in there to get this photo.
Yeah, well, hopefully they were properly wearing the proper ventilation.
No. Like right there, that's the end of one of the wings. So you can see the paint on the ceiling. It was boiled off of there. You could see the vents on the bottom of the windows, those were the boiler systems. So hot water would be pumped throughout the building, but one of them broke and pumped hot water into the wing for a whole weekend. And it was like boiling water too. It wasn't like just fucking warm, boiling water.
Most prisons are privately run, at least and same. There's a lot in the States too. They want repeat customers and not reformed citizens. Yeah, because it's a for-profit prison. It's absolutely insane.
Yeah. By the way, guys, this what was I gonna say? Somebody said this looks neat. Was it abandoned vintage? Yeah, look at that.
Of the week.
Yeah, patient of the week. This looks like it's on the main floor in the main hallway. So basically, that's near the blue room, dude. Can you find a photo of the blue room? Can you go through a bunch of these quick, see if we find one? Because I'd love to show that fucking room.
Abby's sister's breast mug super chatted. Blue. Look, here's the kid. Here, look at this.
There it is. There's some of the. Well, okay, those aren't the older ones. Those are from probably the 80s. Dude, this is exactly what I was talking about. This is out of the fucking nursery area. So, like I said,
so creepy.
Those are still on the fucking wall. Like, you guys think, I don't know if anyone's thinking I made any of this up. That's fucking everything I said. Like, it's there. Like, if you click above to the right, you'll see a barn. See that? The barn.
Yeah.
Yeah, click that. That's in the fucking hospital. If you click, like, the one to the left of it.
Wow.
That's still in there, man. Like, click down to the left a little. Oh, whoa, shit, dude. Click right below that. With the metal doors. Don't move anything. The metal doors. Down. Don't click that. Go down. Left 2. Left 2. Look at it. You ready?
That's a morgue.
Dude, no. That's where the fucking body exploded. I sat on that thing. That's the mortuary. So notice how I told you guys there's 2 doors and there's 2 rooms. If you look through that thing, there's on the other side... That's where the tiles are. That's the mortuary. So on the other side, that's where they cut the bodies up and do the autopsies. On this side of the room, that's the viewing area. So they pull the body through and show the body on this side.
What's a family and...
Yeah. So they'd open that up and go, boom. Dude, that literally is right there. That's a refrigerator. That's the refrigerator that broke down on a weekend and a body exploded in it. You're looking right at it. That's it, guys.
Holy shit.
I sat on that fucking thing on the left. I sat on that thing.
Someone trying to look at the extremely haunted St. Thomas Hospital.
Yeah, that's not in the hospital. By the way, there was a church in the hospital, obviously.
I think you said that, I think.
Yeah, go down. Go down one. Okay, stop. Scroll up to... Okay, you see the bathtub in the dead center? Click that. That is also in the hospital. That was for patients who could not walk. So they essentially bring elderly patients in there, or they bring people who just had broken legs or couldn't walk, put them in that bathtub. That fucking that bathroom was terrifying as well, man. The tubs are still there. It looks identical to that still.
That is fucking freaky.
So anyways, we're done. We're not coming down here to the hospital anymore.
I think that was close to 12 hours or whatever. Yeah, it was around there. If I'm a little short or if I'm not. I don't even think Wes is here anymore. Wes, are you here? Wes is like, yeah, I paid for this, but I'm getting the fuck out of Dodge.
So I hope you guys enjoyed all this nonsense.
No, this is actually... Dude, this shit's up my alley. Are you kidding me?
I'll be up your ass. Okay, do me one more favor. This is the last thing we'll look up. Look up St. Thomas Psychiatric Hospital tunnels. I just want to see if we can get creepy guys out with the final tunnel system. Okay, in the top middle, that looks like it's in the basement.
Right here?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so that right there is the corridor that goes between the hospital and the furnace system. So you'll notice that there's pipes and everything on the ceiling there. That literally is about a mile long to walk. It goes underneath the whole thing. Is this? Oh, dude! Oh my God! Is that what I think it is? 2 to the right. Yeah. What is that? Let me see. No.
Urban exploration.
Okay, wait a minute. That's not the same. However, that right there, what you're looking at, is an old furnace. Picture that thing 3 stories tall, though. That's what the furnaces look like in there. There's no more tunnel photos?
No, let me look. Psychiatric hospital furnace.
Yeah, I looked it up. I couldn't find the furnace photos. There's nothing.
What the fuck is this?
Yeah, does not make sense.
Why the fuck is Woody the Pooh?
Why is there a fucking llama there? That
Listen, put a llama in my ass.
Do tunnels again and see if we can get.
Hold on. I'll go down to large, or let's go to all, and then we could pick through them.
Okay.
Like, what's this?
That is part of the tunnel system. Click it.
Of course, the picture is the size of my penis.
Yeah, you know what, guys? That's the same as the last photo. Essentially, it's the same tunnel. That's not in the hospital.
Buffalo State Asylum. Put a
Go
buffalo in my ass.
Go up. Let me see if.
What is this?
Yep, that's the. Okay. That is the entrance going from the hospital into the tunnel system. That goes to the. Oh, you know what? That might actually be a point of view from the electrical area. However, there was a photo. Is that the gates? Yeah, the photo above there to the left one.
What are you talking about? This photo? Or?
Yeah, the red door one. Click that for a second. Yeah, here we go.
Yeah, that doesn't look horrifying at all.
So that right there is literally the entrance to go over to the hospital. Also, there's a dip on the floor. You can't see it in this photo for some reason because it's so far down, but the floor, it actually goes deeper into the ground as you go deeper into the hospital. Scroll down a little bit. I'm curious to see if
Intro guy probably ate something and passed out.
Okay.
Oh, what is this shit? Look at that.
Yeah, that's one of the bathrooms in the shutdown place. That's from 2015. That person's not smart to go into that fucking room.
Yeah, look at all that shit peeling. Wow.
Go up a little bit. Click on the one in the middle right.
Right here?
One more. Over to the right.
Here?
Yeah. Let me see that quickly.
Yeah, what the fuck is that?
This is the... Okay, what you're seeing here, I was in this. What you're looking at here is the top of one of the elevator shafts. So, on the right side, there's a ladder that goes to the roof. The engine thing that you see on the right is the elevator shaft. The door on the left goes to a walkway across the top of the place. This is actually out of the maintenance area on the far left of the building. I love how I know where this is exactly. I stood in that room. It's fucking not fun. It's not fun.
It does not look pleasant at all.
Oh, is that the fucking gym? Go down one? Right there.
Is that it looks like it would be a gym.
No. I think that is the that's the maintenance wing. That's like fucking almost a mile away from the building. So can you look up like blue rooms? See the blue? See the blue? Go down. See the blue?
Yeah, right here.
No, even down further. Oh, dude, there's more photos of the
kids' room.
The kids' room and also the mortuary, the mortuary.
Yeah, these guys are not smart at all. No masks. And
no, that's fucking dumb, man. You know how dangerous it actually really is in there? Go up one. See the blue...
Here?
No, one up
Here?
and to the right, yeah. See that blue? That's the baby blue I'm talking about, guys. That baby blue is throughout the hospital, and it's designed to keep the patients calm. And then you'll notice that the red is like the door and the fucking fire... pull the fire alarm down. Anyways, we can go on and about this. Well, what is the bottom left photo? Let's just look at that last one.
The fuck is that?
Yeah, click that one. That is not. No, that's in Whitby. That's not same.
Yeah, it's still insane though. What is that? Let me just look at it. Is that part of it? No. That's Michigan.
Dude, that cat photo. Click the cat photo. I swear that might be in the building. Yes, it is. Dude, I swear I remember seeing that. That's in the fucking They used to have a library of VHS tapes.
That is bizarre.
Dude, it's still up. Dude, from 1960 on, they have this fucking weird artwork all over the hospital. And you could I talked about it, and now we're showing it. Yeah, that cat is dead.
Very dead.
Yeah. That's been hanging there since the 60s, man. That's fucking old. Anything else really interesting? You could show a different point of view of the morgue down there. Down a couple. Right there. Up a little. No, not there. Up. Right there or to the right. That's another shot of the morgue. I basically... No, sorry. That's not the same one. No, the other photo. It looks identical because they used to sell the exact same designs. Yeah, that. No, that's also not it. But no, hang on a second. You'll notice that this looks identical to the other one we showed. And that's because there was companies that would install the morgue, from my understanding. So they'd hire a company and they would supply that morgue section to every single fucking hospital in the country.
Yeah, so it was the same company designing the same shit.
Yeah, so if you look at that one and you find the St. Thomas one again, it's identical.
What the fuck is this?
Okay, there, dude.
Look at that. You can see that. So if someone needed to have a movement or whatever.
Yeah. Wait.
Down in there.
Stop for a second. This is terrifying because the door in the right goes to the electricity room that's being revamped. Mm-hmm. That thing you're seeing, remember I said there's like wheelchairs and shit. That right there is a fucking wheelchair from 1950s. And underneath they put like a bedpan, and the patient.
So if that's what I just said. If they had a bowel movement or something,
yeah, patients would be just shitting, and they just sit right on that wood. That hallway, if you notice, actually goes downhill a little bit there.
Yeah, I see that.
You see how slightly. That's what I was talking about from the other photo. The hallway is so long that you can't see the curvature going down. Anyways, dude. Again,
we could go on for. We could go till fucking. Well, he can go till.
Oh, I could
tomorrow.
go all night. I'll shit on your ass.
I mean, I would let Cammy from Street Fighter choke me with her thighs, but